Good evening, everyone. It is March 2nd, 2022. We'll start with the pledge and then go into the session. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
Trustee Fritchie,
Present.
Trustee White,
Present.
Trustee Lopez,
Present.
Trustee Quesada,
Present.
Mayor Levin.
Present.
Okay, we have a public hearing in the matter of proposed local law 2 of 2022, a local law amending chapter 216 sidewalk cafes, outdoor dining and sidewalk sales of the village of Ossining.
Okay. Who's on the agenda to discuss this? Bob, did you have something to say about this?
You
You don't have to, but I
No, no,
know
no.
that you had contacted me earlier. I don't want to put you on the spot, but
That could never happen.
no. It's up to you, but you had some thoughts about it.
I do. I have some thoughts. If I'm understanding this, I think this is wanted to move the dates. If I'm to April 1st, correct?
Correct.
Which is fine. And maybe I don't know, maybe I missed the discussion. I don't know. Maybe I was in somewhere and we talked about the parklets. And I just wanted to put my thoughts out there, seeing that this is going to be something that's going to be coming our way. What I believe is with the parklets, I don't think this year would be a good year to do the parklets. I have serious consideration, not consideration, about losing parking spaces and the possibility of a lot of work going to be going on Main Street. Also with the fact that we're pretty much out of quote unquote the pandemic that we established this for. And there's no mandates, there's nothing. As far as I'm concerned, we're back to pre-pandemic situations with bars, restaurants, whatever. And I believe that with everything that we've got coming up, that it would not be a good time to be taking parking spaces away, nor do they need it. I'm all for, I'll give you 100 sidewalk permits, but I myself am not in favor of the parklets. And we talk about beautifying downtown, orange and white Yodocs. I don't know. I guess you could figure out where I'm going with that. Now, Stuart, correct me if I'm wrong. Those parklets are ours, correct? God forbid a car went through, something happened, backing up, went through it and hit somebody. That's on us, correct?
Well, one, we require insurance, and two, we require a hold harmless and indemnification clause from every property owner who does it.
Okay.
We had those last year as well.
All right. So anyways, that's my thoughts on this. I'm a week late, so be it. I still have thoughts. It's an open discussion. I just think that we're back to pre-pandemic as far as any mandates, and there's none. And I don't think that we should be giving up the parking spaces right now. So that's all I have to say.
So if I may, and again, I don't like putting people on the spot, Bob. I didn't tell you I was going to say, hey, Bob, speak up. But the truth is you called me earlier today. So I think it's a public hearing that we're looking at local laws. So I think regarding the pandemic, we've had to do a lot of edits to laws. We've had to make changes. We've had to go through, I don't know, Stuart at one point was keeping count of how many mandates are coming from the governor. We passed like number 90 at some point during this more than 2 years. It's a lot. It's a lot to keep track of. It's a lot to do. So the sidewalk, if I understood this correctly, these parklets were designed because people could not use their indoor facility to manage their business, and it was hurting their business. It wasn't done because we were all of a sudden giving outdoor space. It was done because outdoor space was healthier. And during a pandemic, because indoor space was unhealthy. I think the point being made, and this, by the way, just for perspective, involves, I think, 5 places in all, if I counted it correct. I thought it was 4, but it may be 5. And so this is not about whether restaurants should have outdoor seating, because you can get a permit for that. It's whether we should continue with the parklets, which are really on the street. And the intention of the board, when we asked that we go back to this legislation and then bring it up a month early, which is really what we discussed, was brought on, I think, by me, by Dana White, maybe by all of us, I don't know, very recently. But 48 hours ago, or a week ago, the governor sort of changed a lot of the underlying rules by saying no masking. People still need to be vaccinated. But the masking part is over. People can go inside restaurants without masks. The tables and chairs do not actually, to my knowledge, need to be, 6 feet apart with 101 rules to them. So why are we doing the parklets? Is another way to think about it. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Bob, but I think the point you're bringing up is we did it for a reason. That reason is no longer with us. So why are we continuing with that reason? That's basically, and I think that we're all elected officials and everybody has an equal right to an opinion. And so I feel a little bit awkward because we're the ones that requested this. We had the attorneys sit around and spend a lot of time on this. And now we're sitting here going, can we take a step back and see if this is really what we want? And I guess I would also have to ask, this whole idea of outdoor cafes, because we've had these parklets, has really taken off. I mean, I wish all these restaurants were sort of near each other and that we can create a space for outdoor dining. It doesn't work well for the restaurants in our downtown because they're not close enough to each other. And none of these folks have enough staff that if we opened another area, like, I don't know, in Market Square, Thursday and Fridays and Saturdays, they would have to actually hire more staff and to deliver, to serve the people. In places like Tarrytown, it's right outside where the restaurants are. And once a month, they close part of the street off down Main Street. It's very lovely. It's just not the way we're set up. So that being said, I'd like some opinions. I think because this is a public hearing, though, and we posted it, if there are people attending who would like to speak to this, I think we are going to have to go also through that process. Correct, Stuart?
Mayor, you should do that process first if there's anyone who wishes
Right.
to
speak
yes.
about it. Right. I should have done that. But be that as it may, Bob, I think we've heard some of your, it's fine to go through that. So can we see if there's anybody attending? There are 5 people attending. If any one of you would like to speak on this matter.
We have Chief Gallery here, so I'm going to bring him over. He has his hand raised. So Scott, I'm bringing you over right now. We're having a little Zoom problems with promoting to panelists. So if you don't come over and turn your camera on, it's not working. I'm just going to hit allow you to talk. Oh, there you are. All right, your hand's up. Can you unmute, Scott? Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Hello?
Yeah, Chief, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's all right. We don't see you. We just see a picture, but.
Well, I'm not the greatest to read, but I did put something together, and it pretty much, I'm not asking for any answers tonight. I'm just giving you what I feel as a village resident. By the way, Madam Mayor and Village Board, thank you for letting me speak tonight. When the village first proposed to help the merchants with the outside dining, reason was for helping them through the pandemic. Now the pandemic is 95% behind us. Why are we still doing the roadside dining? I'm not against the curbside dining. I'm against the roadside dining. Then there's the permit fee. I know there's a permit fee that they pay, but does it equal to what the village generates off the meters that they're occupying for the period of time that they are using them? Then there's the barriers. The residents of Ossining obviously paid for them, should have been paid for by the merchants. It shouldn't have been paid for by the residents of the village. Most communities have the merchants pay, they build structures, they do what they do. We didn't do that. Having these barriers, they look like they should be out on a construction site, not on Main Street in Ossining. I keep hearing about the beautifying the downtown, but when you drive down and there's garbage cans on the outside of the barriers, there's litter all over the ground blown up against the barriers, I wouldn't call that beautifying. As part of a business owner on Main Street, I own part of a business with my son. Just happens to be near the restaurants. It's not fair to the merchants to lose parking when we already have a parking problem. Then there's the merchants who do not serve food, but they can use our sidewalk in the village and use our streets to serve liquor and host their bar. This was supposed to help the eateries, not the bars. Not supposed to have picnic tables on the street. As a resident of the village of Ossining, I feel that the village should do what is right for the entire community, not just certain people. I wish you would consider reviewing this before making your final decision. Again, thank you for letting me speak. I'm speaking as a resident of the village, and I appreciate you letting me talk tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Very much appreciate your voice in this. Anyone else wishing to speak on this topic? See anything, Jamie?
I'm sorry, I was trying to move Scott back over. I apologize.
Okay.
It doesn't
No,
look like
that's okay.
it doesn't look like anyone has their hands up. Anyone else? Okay. No.
Okay. Thank you. So now I'll go back to a board discussion and
Mayor, you may want to close the public hearing first.
I don't know if I actually.
Mayor, if I may, can I?
I don't know if I actually want to do that right now.
I move to adjourn it.
I move to it. I second that motion.
You're adjourning it?
Correct, Mayor, yes.
Yes, that's my motion.
You need to
Does that
adjourn it to a
mean-
date.
What does
you need
that
to
mean,
adj-
adjourning it?
You
Does
need
that-
to adjourn it to a date
not close it.
certain, otherwise you have to renotice it.
Can I'm gonna argue for the parklets. I think they were a great addition.
Dana, before you go on, I think that Manny is asking for an adjournment so we can move it to one more week. That allows you to then also continue the conversation. We just wouldn't be voting on this.
Yeah, so I
Correct.
would like to, yeah, Mayor, I would like to adjourn
You didn't
correct, for another 2 weeks, which will be May 16th.
No, it wouldn't be May 16th.
I'm sorry, March 16th. I apologize, March 16th.
Right. We have a bit of a conundrum. Dana, I'm going to let you speak. We have a conundrum in that while we do have one person that spoke, this is last time we spoke about this, and we've spoken about this a bit, and I understand that a lot changed when mandates have changed at the government level, at the state level. But the reality is that people who own those restaurants wouldn't be here tonight, because in meeting with different trustees and conversations, they were under the understanding that this was already done because it's already been thoroughly discussed. And the only reason it's here tonight is we're moving it from 1 month up, not to actually relitigate the entire idea of the parklets. That wasn't actually what they were told, and in fairness to them, they have a say in it too, and they probably would be here had they realized that the entire concept is being discussed, rather than the revision, which is to move it up 1 month. which is a very different topic of whether we move it up a month or not, which is really all they were expecting us to decide. So we have a bit of a conundrum, and I understand how we got here. So Stuart, if we have to first adjourn and then Trustee White wants to put her 2 cents worth and her opinion about it, what's the process here?
Well, Mayor, let me just make one point to the board. The proposal is to go from May 1 to April 1.
Correct.
The board was already working under a very tight deadline. If this motion, if the hearing is adjourned to the 16th, the board, the next legislative meeting after the 16th is April 6th. And while the board could call a special meeting, ordinarily the vote for on a local law is at the following legislative meeting. So you'd essentially, and it would not become law until effectively the middle of April, because it's going to take at least, as Martha will verify this with me, at least 2 weeks for the Secretary of State. So
Right.
what you'd then be looking at is you probably wouldn't have this law on the books until approximately the 20th of April, which for all intents and purposes effectively makes the law essentially moot.
Okay.
So I'm not saying whatever way, I just wanted to be understood that it was done on a very truncated schedule. We could have a special meeting if the board decides to adjourn and would rather, in fact, continue this discussion either next week or on the 16th, and then they could vote on the 16th. They could do that as well.
Okay, and I have one more question for you.
Sure.
Then I just want to chime in to put context on this. The other piece of this is we passed the legislation, it has a date on it. If, for example, the 5-way intersection, which is another concern that was stated, at least to me, if that is a concern, can we change the legislation at a later date to truncate it more? Because there's an end date to this too. Can we change the end date as a piece of legislation?
The board can amend it any way it wishes. If it
At any
wants
time.
to change October 1 to September 1 or September 15th.
Okay,
You could do that. There may be a way to do that without having to go through all of this, but the answer is yes.
yeah,
that could be changed.
okay. So here's, I would like to add my 2 cents worth to put context on it. I get the adjournment. I also have to remind the board that it's the board that asked that this all be moved, not the staff. It was the board that asked in order to help the businesses. In fairness to the businesses, they had no idea that this was even being discussed this way, since they assumed, I think rightfully, that the legislation was done. It's just a matter of giving them actually an extra month was what was being discussed. And I do think there has to be some fairness in how we reach out. And we've discussed this for I don't know, it's got to be 2 to 3 weeks, 4 weeks at this point. So I'm not comfortable with doing anything but going forward, because I think it feels unfair to some of the people involved, even if it's not all. And there's been time to discuss this. The only thing we were supposed to vote on today is the month. So I'll let others speak. There is a motion to adjourn. There is a second. There would have to be a vote to do that. But so I'd like to get some comments, because this is my discomfort.
I'll
with
comment.
where
I'm
this
going
is
to vote
going.
against any move to adjourn, okay? I also think it's a big leap to go from, we're going to discuss moving this by a month, to all of a sudden going, oh, we don't want parklets at all. Okay, that's a big leap, and it's not fair. It's not fair to the businesses. It's not fair to us after we've been discussing this. I happen to know when the parklets were removed late last year, at least one business saw its revenue drop 15%. And yeah, it was called, we did it for the pandemic, but the fact is, people like them. It was it's a big draw for, it helps business. And to me, that helping these businesses is my priority over, I'm not quite sure what exactly the complaint is, but it is not fair. It is not fair to go from discussing and voting on, we're going to move it up a month, to suddenly, all of a sudden throwing the whole thing up into question. It's not fair. I do not vote to adjourn.
Okay, anybody else? I mean, I've already spoken. I think the only person left is Omar, if you have anything to say.
Sure. I basically echo Dana's sentiments on not wanting to adjourn. The idea of wanting to push them up a month is because there was a recognition that the businesses have gone through a lot over the course of the last couple of years, and there are a limited number of tools that we have in our tool belt to be able to help them in one fell swoop. This was one of them in a small way, making it so that these parklets would be available a month before, but also as a signal saying we will do whatever we can to help these businesses to be as successful as possible. Recognizing that nothing is without trade-offs, on balance, it felt like this was the right move. So my feelings with respect to that remain consistent, and I would also vote to not adjourn.
Okay. So there is a motion in a second. There has to be a vote because that's the process. So somebody actually
Mayor-
has to
Mayor,
say, we'll
before-
take a vote. Yeah,
So Mayor, before we vote on it,
sure.
just say, thank you. So the concept for me is still remains the same. I think, I want to be certain that the concept of helping the businesses on my end is still the same. That hasn't changed. I think we have to be fair within the process. And I know this is a little bit of a conundrum, like the mayor said, that something, a different idea pop up today, or a different concept. To me, it would be unfair if we were not to listen to the community as a whole either, because we do represent them as well. So my concept of adjourning to, from 2 weeks from now, that doesn't mean that if we have a discussion, a deeper discussion for next Wednesday, as Stuart brought it up, we can have a meeting, special meeting at any time. We can call a special meeting on Thursday, let's say, and say, you know what, we discussed it last night. We all agree that this is the way to move forward. I just want to have that opportunity, not just for us, but for the members of the community as well, to express their feelings.
That's what this public engagement is about.
I understand that. But again, right now, like it was stated, we are voting to make this a month before it was supposed to be. I'm not disagreeing with that concept at all.
We're not gonna, if we delay it, then it becomes moot because we will be well into April now by delaying.
But if we have a special meeting the day after our work session.
I just think you're complicating it. Why, I really don't understand where this is coming from.
So I think that representative government is what we're about. And I spoke to Bob earlier today. I don't know, 4 hours ago, 3 hours ago. It's a 2-2. So here's where I stand on it. We've been discussing this for weeks. I haven't received until tonight one email to my inbox complaining that we're doing parklets a month early. And we've had these meetings, we've had these discussions. I have not received complaints from the public. I mean, this isn't, and I appreciate Scott Gallery coming tonight, and I appreciate Bob Fritchie bringing this up. It's a little bit sort of after the fact for me. I mean, I get one vote, just like you guys do. I also just haven't received complaints about doing, I mean, if I received complaints, I would say, look, this is a controversial issue. The controversy of us paying, as Scott Gallery said, that was like a year ago when we sat here and asked the staff to do hours of research. Who pays for it? What are the costs? Who's going to pay for it? What else can we use them for? Is it only for this? Could we use them for other things because we're using taxpayer dollars? I mean, again, weeks of discussion about that. So we already had this discussion a year ago, and I have made it really clear that I do not like to relitigate scenarios, because we do not move forward if we keep going backwards. I don't have one email that I've received that says that the parklets are bad for the community, that the 8 or 9 parking spots that were given up can't be made up in parking in other areas. There's 2 hours on Saturday and a couple of hours in the afternoons where there's a real traffic jam of parking, but the rest is fine. Actually, I get many more that says, why don't you do more? Why aren't you doing like Tarrytown, shut a whole street down, or Peekskill that created an entire area? I get emails. And so I do think, Manny, that we are representing the public at large, because every person that comes in front of us is speaking for themselves. The we concept is really I. People speak for themselves. Otherwise, I'd be getting a lot more emails about it. I walked in tonight to talk about a month earlier. We could vote on that or not. I don't think we should relitigate this. I do think that Bob had made a point to me that if this affects the work that we have to do in the downtown that regards construction, the 5-way intersection, and other issues that come up, then we should deal with those issues as they come up to us, either from other businesses, from the public, and say, okay, so now we have a problem, right? Now we have an issue and we need to deal with it. We may have to move on the parklets and say they're done by a certain month, because now they're getting in the way of something. To date, I have not received any such thing, either directly or indirectly. Don't think the staff has either, because they would normally make me aware of it. So for me, I'm not going to support a last minute changeover, because we've been discussing this for weeks. And if we need to do development, and if this becomes a problem, either from a site, a beautification, a site, a problem through our village, I agree with Bob. I don't think they're good looking. They don't beautify. A couple of the folks who own restaurants have added flowers and all of that. I don't find them beautiful. I was in the city. I find these things to be getting worse looking and not better looking. That being said, the overall message is very much in line with what we've been discussing for weeks, which is this is better for business. If we could help other businesses, we would. If somebody has ideas of how we can help businesses, if that gets added to our, what did you call it, Omar, tool belt or toolkit? I didn't hear what you said. Either a tool belt or a toolkit. We're all ears on how to help all businesses. It became apparent how we could help restaurants. If you get to help others, we'll do that too. So if we're in the middle of a vote, I'm not voting.
Before we go
for
to
that.
vote, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Before we close, Mark Fry has his hand up and he'd like to speak before it closes.
Before it closes. Okay.
Yes. So can I bring him over?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
no problem. Mr. Fry, I'm bringing you over.
Put my glasses on.
He is on his way. If you can unmute and turn your camera on, Mr. Fry, that would be great. Thank you. Unmute, please.
There he is.
You're still muted.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted and on camera. Well, that's all I need to do. Good night. No, seriously, I've lived in Tarrytown for a long, long time, starting in 1977, and came up to Ossining very frequently to visit some friends when Main Street Ossining was being revitalized starting in 1977. It's a tremendously, in Tarrytown, I owned a building there on Main Street. I owned a restaurant on Main Street. And I was so happy when I went back there a couple of months ago. I had dinner with my wife in front of my old building. So I certainly support everything that Dana White had to say, and those that support that, Omar Lopez, Trustee Lopez, and the others. I think what you have in front of you tonight is a very simple resolution that would allow you to close the public hearing and vote in favor of extending the current situation for one more month, to bring it forward and open on April 1st. I have seen how these always start out small, but little by little by little, you create excitement at the street level. People like to walk down the street and watch people having fun, drinking wine having great almond croissants at First Coffee. So I think the concept's a wonderful one, and I certainly agree with Trustee White and the others who are suggesting instead of, you do have a motion in front of you to adjourn the meeting, and I would respectfully request that you reject that motion, you vote that down, and then instead have a motion to close the public hearing and vote on the issue that's before you now. So thanks for allowing me to contribute. My two
Thank you,
cents.
sir. Thanks for joining us tonight. Is that it? I think no more hands, yeah?
No more hands. Did you want to do a last call?
I think we're done.
Oh,
Yep, not seeing anyone. So the vote, what's on the floor right now is a
Motion
first,
now is the motion to adjourn.
correct. So we would have to do, you want to call it out, Martha?
We have a previous motion, don't we?
That's the motion to adjourn.
That's
Oh,
the
I'm
motion.
sorry. I'm sorry.
That's the one we're voting on right now, not closing the public hearing.
I stand corrected.
No, it's okay. I know, that's why I was trying to get clarity before. Okay, Martha,
So do I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing to March 16th?
So moved.
Second.
we already did this. It's the vote part,
Oh,
Martha.
I'm so sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those against?
And
Now that would you guys have to actually say the word
You have
aye.
to say you're
Is it aye?
opposed.
Is
If
it
you're
Aye or
opposed,
nay? Yeah, if you're opposed,
Aye or nay? Martha, which is it? Aye or nay?
nay,
say
nay,
say nay,
nay.
please.
nay.
Nay. Okay,
Okay, the
Now-
motion does not pass. So now you can entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved?
need a second.
Second.
Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.
Aye.
Opposed?
Hey,
I'm just so sorry. Trustee Quesada, did you say nay or a?
No, I said abstain.
Oh, abstain. Okay.
Okay, did you get all the votes, Martha?
I believe I did. Thank you.
You want to read them back?
Okay, give me 1 second. Trying to make sense of my notes. Okay, so
That's all right.
I had 1 second.
Just for this one, not
Okay.
the other.
Sure. So I had a nay from Trustee Ferry, and I had an abstain from Trustee Quesada, and then I had an agreement for yay from Mayor Levin, Trustee White, and Trustee Lopez. Is that
Thank you.
correct?
to close the public hearing, right?
Yes, correct. To close the public hearing.
Okay.
Okay.
Now we're voting on the proposed law.
No, unless you wish to. You can right now if
can.
you want to. You
Right.
can. Ordinarily, you wait till the next legislative, but if you wish to vote on it tonight, you are absolutely may.
Okay. We can do this tonight. We can do it on another time. It's a question of where the urgency is from your point of view. Trying to.
If you vote for it on the 16th, Mayor, it will have enough time to get up to the Secretary of State and be in effect as of April 1.
Okay, and that's normally what we do.
That is correct.
All right, so
I
unless
mean, I'm
somebody,
willing to let this play out as we originally discussed. I mean, I'm willing to not vote on it tonight. I'm willing to wait till. the
that's what I was
16th.
going to ask. I'd like to stay with our process. I'd like to treat everything as equitably as we can, that we're not changing things midstream on either side of any conversation. So unless somebody objects, I just want to move forward the way we had planned to do. If there are other issues, people I'm sure will be emailing me and commenting, and I'm sure the village manager will be hearing as well, et cetera, et cetera. I do think, though, that Trustee Ferry brings a point that there will have to be discussion in a few months down the road, as we should with other things, and say, look, there are some people that are on the belief that this was done for a purpose. Let people get, if they want to have outdoor seating, let them get permits for it. And they'll have outdoor seating. no need for parklets, to be honest. So that is a conversation I think that will have to come back on the table, because I think that was one piece of this that I don't want to just let drop, because I think it was actually the most pertinent piece of this conversation, is parklets, which are not the same as sidewalk cafes. Those are two different things. The parklets go into the street, sidewalk cafes are on the sidewalk, and those you can get permits for. So, are we all good? I think so. Somebody will correct me if I am wrong. Mayor and trustee announcements. I think, Martha, is the next thing on the agenda.
Correct. Are there any trustees and mayor's announcements?
Does anyone have announcements? Okay. I would actually like to say a couple of things. I was actually on the phone with someone a little bit earlier. My heart goes out to the folks who are trying to maintain a democratic country in the Ukraine. I did not know until recently that we had north of 64,000 Ukrainians living here in Westchester, and that there are entire organizations. In my mayor's note, I wrote about a couple of organizations, if you so choose to help the folks in the Ukraine with either charitable contributions to help, I mean, they're in the middle of a war at this point, or do volunteer work. AFIA is also an organization that sends medical supplies to these kind of war-torn areas. And I do want to say that I'm sure I'm joined by many on this call that our hearts go out to the people of Ukraine and what they're going through. And I'm personally not a fan of Putin, and you know, what I consider to be his maniacal behavior. But at the local government level, we could say certain things, but frankly, we don't have much to say about international affairs. But there are organizations here locally. There's a big organization in Yonkers. There are Ukrainian churches. And so if you wish to help, there are places, and they're all over the internet, on how you could help. I also want to make mention, and I always feel a little bit awkward about this, that yesterday was the beginning of Women's History Month. I feel awkward because I always think it's a little bit strange to have months dedicated to groups, as if like the rest of the 11 months, there's no attention to that group. So it's a little bit, for me, it's always a balancing act, but I do think it's nice to have a Women's History Month. We just completed the Black History Month. I personally have learned that it's nice to have a spotlight on certain historical moments or people that make up the fabric of our country. And I spoke to the historian, and hopefully we will be seeing some more information and spotlight on women. I personally like living in Westchester, and I like living in Ossining because women actually have held important positions and positions of magnitude in politics, and continue to do so. So I sometimes forget that we're actually unique in that is not the case in other parts of New York or in the country. So I'm always very grateful for that. And I'm sure there will be more events announced, and that's it for my announcements. So I did actually want to ask if it's on the agenda. I didn't see it. Is the childcare piece on here as well for signing, or is that?
It's there, Mayor.
Great, thank you. I didn't get a chance. I started looking at it because I actually want to make people much more aware of it. Our conversation last week, I think unexpectedly became more than the folks who were presenting thought it was going to be, but that's because, you know, we live in the suburbs and we raise children, and it's expensive in this part of the country to have daycare, both home and also when you're paying for it privately. It's exceedingly expensive. For many, it's the cost of college. It's just mind-boggling. And oftentimes it doesn't leave you money for college if you're trying to save money for the same children because you spent it on daycare when they were younger. So and that's where people can actually afford it. The people who can't afford that really have to give up jobs to do that. And the pandemic, I think, especially for women, proved that to be the case. So I am hopeful that this is one of the learnings from the pandemic, that we need to spend more on childcare. So I'm really excited that we all signed it wholeheartedly, or will sign it, I hope, and that we will maybe give it a little bit more of a spotlight. So that's it for my announcements. If anybody has any, just let me know. Not seeing any, we're going to move on. Martha?
Okay, we have our administrative report from Village Manager Karen DeTore. Is Maddie going to be speaking first, or are you, Karen?
I have a couple of things first, Martha. So just quickly, a few appointments for the land use boards. Isabel Nigel, I am appointing her. She's currently an alternate on the planning board. We're appointing her for a 5-year term to end 12/31/2026. And then we are appointing Carla Christine Gieben Elia, an alternate to the planning board, to assume an unfinished term ending 12/31/2024. And Michael Spall as an alternate to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a full term ending 12/31/2026. Now I'm going to curtail my announcements. I think I went over a lot already the last time, and there's always stuff going on, but I do want to leave time for Maddie Zahach, who was had a presentation ready at the work session that we postponed to this week. The staff has done a tremendous amount of work on following up on the parking study that we did with Nelson Nygaard. Tonight, we'll be looking at the in lieu of parking, the in lieu of fee for as an alternative for people who are to parking waivers for people who are developing when they have challenges getting parking in certain places in Ossining. It's one of the strategies not only that was presented by Nelson Nygaard in the recent study, but also has come before past boards to discuss a way to alleviate some of the challenges that we have with parking and meet the needs of our community more fully. This is a lot of information. The board received this presentation in advance, so I hope that you all had a chance to review it. I anticipate that it may require more discussion, but the purpose of this is to get the board engaged in this conversation, make sure that we're getting the direction from you on where you want to go with this. And likely it will probably need, there may be more discussion needed at a future work session, but we will be discussing what the proposal is, what other communities are doing, other similar communities, and making recommendations to the board on what Ossining needs to go forward to fulfill this. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Assistant Village Manager Maddie Zahach.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. In recognition of the fact that we have a pretty packed agenda this evening, I am going to try to keep this pretty high level. As the manager mentioned, the board has seen this presentation in advance and also has an accompanying memo, and this will be shared in the agenda as well. Can everyone see my screen? Yes? Okay, great. So as the manager mentioned, an in lieu fee for downtown Ossining is something that has come up quite a few times over the past couple of years as we consider how to alleviate the perceived parking problem in downtown Ossining. And we had a couple of notes from when we brought this up 2 weeks ago, specifically what are the goals and objectives, and then not necessarily leaning towards an overlay zone. So I just wanted to let you know I got those notes. As far as goals and objectives, we have 3. The first is to increase the ease and convenience of parking in downtown Ossining. The next is condensing, expanding, and improving the parking supply by promoting shared parking opportunities. And finally, to continue to facilitate development and adaptive reuse of downtown properties while defraying some taxpayer costs to construct and maintain parking facilities. So what do we have right now? Right now, the Village Code offers really 2 paths to developers who are looking to reduce these parking requirements. The planning board can approve a parking waiver, or the zoning board can approve an area variance for parking. So let's first look at the parking waiver. Applicants before the planning board may apply for parking waivers in only 3 village zoning districts: the VC, the SPN, and the NC2. You can see a map of those districts here. So here's the Village Center, Station Plaza North, and then Neighborhood Commercial 2, which is this section in here, and then this broader section going up Croton Avenue. And then here's the section of the Village Code. So we were asked to take a look at the history of how many developers have asked for a parking waiver over the past couple of years. 49 Spring Street was granted a waiver, although it's not clear from the minutes how many spaces were granted. And then 5-9 Water Street was granted 8 spaces. So you can see the location of those 2 spots on the map here. This is the one on Spring Street, and this is the other. Zoom in. Everyone's probably familiar with this area of Spring Street. So that was the one that was granted the unknown amount of spots, I believe. And then this area was granted the 8 spots, or do I have them backwards? Yeah, Water Street was granted 8 and Spring Street was granted an unknown amount of spaces. So the count for the last 3 years is 8 parking spaces that were waived under this program. So to go the other way, an area variance approved by the zoning board. So outside of the zoning districts mentioned, property owners may approach the zoning board for an area variance related to parking. Parking requirements are set out in tables C1 to C4 in the village zoning code. Got a couple of those things right here in case anyone wants to reference them. And so looking at the same period of time, area variances for parking that went before the Zoning Board of Appeals and were approved totaled 32 spaces over the past 3 years. So you see at 20 Main Street, 92 South Highland Avenue, 65 Main, 53 Bellevue, and 26 Campwood. So again, 32 spaces plus 8 and change. So we're talking about 40 spaces within the last 3 years that have been waived. So how do we know what's the best fit for Ossining? Not all in lieu funds are created equal. So we have to sort of get our parameters straight before we really enter this discussion in earnest. So first, what improvements will the revenues fund? Where might the improvements be located? And in which districts will projects be eligible to contribute to the in lieu fund? And how much should we be charging per space? So a lot of this advice comes from the Nelson Nygaard Mobility and Parking Study, and following conversations with the folks at Nelson Nygaard as we really try to drill down and understand this better. So the 2 points that they've given us in this category are to consider a broad definition of investment authority to define how the funds can be used. They gave the example here of Aspen, Colorado as something that they very much liked, which pretty much runs the gamut. Anything that has to do with public parking, as well as transportation, mobility, the storage of those things, transportation, demand management facilities, anything mobility related are all things that can be funded through the in lieu fund in Aspen, Colorado. So that's sort of what they would recommend. And then secondly, determine and memorialize the order of spending, first in, first out, and the consequences for failing to spend timely. In a look at the Corporation Council's research, it doesn't look like many communities are doing the second thing, but it's definitely something that is strongly suggested for moving forward. In terms of where, if the board decides not to take broad authority, so for example, if they say all the in lieu funds are going to go to a structured parking located at 123 Main Street, just for an example, participation should be limited to adjacent neighborhoods only. The reason behind that is kind of obvious. If someone on Mohegan Road says that they're not going to be able to offer parking, there's no reason why that parking should be offset downtown. It's not a walkable distance. However, if the board does wish to take broad authority, so similar to Aspen, invest in parking related assets, generally speaking within the village, you'll need to define which zoning districts will be able to buy in. And some communities have done an overlay district, and Deputy Mayor, I know that was not something that you were crazy about, but we'll look at a couple examples in a moment. And then finally, how much per space? Nelson Nygaard has recommended a graduated scale. You can see here, this is from the final report appendices, between 1 and 5 spaces, 5,000 per, 6 to 10, 10,000 per, and so on. Again, if you're looking at the last couple of years that I think we said we had 40 spaces, that would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 40. No, that's not right at all. Probably about $1 million. So just some thoughts as we're considering how to structure the payment. And then to determine the right fee, we would basically look at the per space cost of developing off-street parking for a developer as opposed to for municipal parking. And we don't want to make this an unattractive option, but at the same time, we want people to offer parking on site if it is feasible for them to do so. And finally, we're making the recommendation for the board to revisit this each year during the budget process in the fee schedule, as the cost of labor and supplies are likely to change from year to year and likely increase. So very quickly, I'm going to go through a couple of the local solutions. These are our neighboring communities who are doing something similar. And again, thanks to the Corporation Counsel's Office for this research. In Scarsdale, it's the planning board that has discretion. And again, the board updates the fees periodically, and the revenue is restricted to adding parking within the parking district. What's sort of interesting about Scarsdale is they sort of go a bit further because they've already taken a look at within the parking district, if a building is to change use, how that might be dealt with in terms of folks being able to buy out parking if their parking needs increase. And basically what they say is if there's a change to require more parking, the developer must provide it offsite. It can't be bought out. It's just got to be located somewhere else, potentially outside of the parking district, which is interesting. The Village of Ardsley, it only allows it in a certain district, and it's $10,000 per space, period, end of story. The payment can go into a trust fund for public parking space benefits, designed to increase the quantity and quality of municipal parking to serve that district. The interesting thing here is they don't ask that the fee be paid up front. They say that the Board of Trustees can consider a 10-year agreement to make good on that $10,000 per space. Probably not something that we would recommend. In the Village of Tarrytown, the applications go to the zoning or planning board. You can only buy out 15 spaces. That's the max. It's restricted to one specific zone, and the fund use is somewhat limited, which sort of goes against what we've been recommended to do by Nelson Nygaard. Shall be used exclusively for the creation of new parking in the downtown commercial area or for the maintenance of the existing parking. And again, it's suggested that we consider mobility improvements and things of that nature in the broad definition. The Village of Larchmont has the Board of Trustees grant approvals, but with a reference to the planning board for review and comment. They do not require a variance. And then something that I really liked is that the broad authority includes soft costs. So instead of just saying the money from the in lieu fund has to go to develop new parking or maintain existing, it also allows for planning, feasibility, environmental and other studies and professional fees, which was somewhat unique to Larchmont. We didn't see that anyplace else. The fee is flexible. I think this is a little dangerous. The amount shall be established by resolution of the BOT from time to time and may be adjusted on a case-by-case basis. I think that's probably what we want to steer away from. The fee is payable prior to issuance of a building permit. That's a good idea. And then you get a 50% discount for granting an easement or land to the Village of Larchmont, so long it's within the area and it's something that they can either create a green space or do some passive development on. Mount Kisco, again, they only allow it in certain districts. You can within those districts, you can only buy out of 50% of required spaces. The revenues only go to increase the quality or availability of parking in those districts. And from what I could gather, the fee appears to be $12,000 per space. The last time it was updated was 2019. And they do have some language for downtown overlay zone, which is something that certainly, the board may wish to consider. So the language for that is right here. And basically, if you opt into the overlay zone, you can discharge more than 50% of your required parking. There's some other cool ideas in here about when a parking study is required. If it's only 5 spots or fewer, you don't need a parking study. And basically, once you go through this pretty prescriptive process, you're able to buy out at the end. And then finally, the Village of Dobbs Ferry has some cool stuff. They have a downtown, you're only allowed to do payment in lieu of parking in a downtown zoning district. The BOT has discretion about whether or not a project would be eligible. The payment is due prior to a certificate of occupancy being issued. And again, they use broad authority here. And the Dobbs Ferry fee schedule is somewhat similar to what Nelson Nygaard had provided, although again, Nelson Nygaard's was meant to be illustrative. It wasn't necessarily what they were recommending for us. And Dobbs Ferry also uses this 50% payment reduction where the proposed development donates land or an easement to the village. So that's what our neighbors are doing. So what do we do now? Assuming the board does want to move forward with this, it is advisable that the board pass a local law declaring a fixed term moratorium on parking waivers before the planning board. So basically passing a short-term moratorium between 6 and 12 months that basically would freeze all developers' ability to get a parking waiver before the planning board until such time as the board has the ILF in place, which we think will probably take about 6 months. And then finally, the timeline. So this has moved a couple times based on our evolving meeting schedule here. But basically the next step would be the introduction of a proposed local law for that moratorium that I just described. So potentially we could have that discussion at next week's work session if this is something that everybody would at least like to explore, and then sort of go from there. And as you can see at the bottom, if everything goes on schedule, granted it's a somewhat aggressive schedule, we might be able to wrap this up by the end of July. So I think that was my fastest presentation ever, and happy to take any questions.
I have a question about the moratorium. Would that affect projects currently in front of the planning or zoning board?
Maddie, you want me to answer that?
Yes, please.
Trustee White, ordinarily the answer to that question is yes. What the board can do, though, if it decides to pass a moratorium, which would be a change to the zoning code, so it would have to go to the planning board, as Maddie noted, you could put in that it would become effective as of, let's say, April 1 or May 1. And so any application that is not that it's effective, that, you know, applications submitted as of April 1 would be, if you want to call it, pre-moratorium. And then anything subsequent there too would be subject to the moratorium. But the general rule is that unless a building permit has been issued, generally those properties are affected by moratorium.
Why would we need to put a moratorium? Just because, you know, in this.
The idea
That would affect every project, even if it's not in any of these zones.
Well, this would depend upon what kind of moratorium the board would want. If, for example, the moratorium was just with regard to the parking waiver, which only the planning board can grant, that only works in 3 zoning districts. And I should point out something I discussed with staff and with our planning director. If you put into place a moratorium with regard to parking waivers, that does not mean that those property owners could not seek a parking variance from the zoning board. All you would be doing would be stopping the parking moratorium, which is provided under 270-30, I think it's 812. But the idea of the moratorium is that essentially you hold the status quo while you are considering a change. It's commonly seen, this board did not do that, but it is commonly seen in connection with comprehensive plans, major zoning text changes, where rather than having a hodgepodge while you're making the change, you basically put a halt to the activity for the short period of time that the moratorium goes into effect. That's basically what it does. But if you're only looking at a moratorium as to parking waivers, that would only affect projects within those 3 zoning districts, as the assistant manager noted.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maddie. I really appreciated the detail of your presentation, and to me is one of those common sense things that addresses a real issue in our village. The devil always is in the details, and so however it is that we choose, whether we choose to move forward with this, and then exactly how, we'll have to hash that out. But my sense is that the kinds of things that, for example, give the board the opportunity to say yes or no with respect to moving forward with certain in lieu of projects, things like that is likely the direction that we will go. And to me, it would be a real shame leaving a lot of money on the table, both literally and figuratively, if we were not to move forward with this. So if at this point we're just kind of getting the high level information, mark me down as a person interested in hearing more and broadly supported.
Great, thank you.
I guess I could go next. So I'll be brief. I have a lot of questions, but I do want to thank you, Maddie, for bringing this now. I've just been talking about this for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now. But in any case, I guess I just have one question and not related to what I'm in favor of this. Just to be clear, I'm in favor of this. But I do have a recollection, and you guys don't, this is more, now that I see Jaime is here, more towards Jaime than anything else. 14 Church Street. Can you look into that project? For some reason, I want to say that was a debate on either if they were getting a waiver for parking or they didn't want it, or they couldn't have it. I don't remember exactly, but that
Did you say
project,
church or did you say water?
no, church, 14 church.
14 Church received a parking waiver.
Okay, so that was not on your list, though, Matt.
We only went back
That was
to
a few years
2019.
back.
Yeah.
Okay, that's so again, for some reason, I want to say it was recently because I believe Jaime was part of the planning board, was with us. So I'm not sure if it's prior to that. So could you double check that for me, Jaime? But besides that, I have I'm gonna wait until we actually have a presentation on a work session, because I do have questions on regards to this. So, but thank you, Matt. It was a really good presentation.
Absolutely, thank you.
Dana, you already asked, I think, your questions because it was about moratorium. Bob, questions, comments, thoughts? You don't have to have any, just going around the gallery.
No, I'm good. Very, very informative. Thank you, Maddie. As usual, good job. I'm gonna also wait for the work session.
Great. So Maddie, I know we weren't able to do it at the work session. We'll do it at the next one. So thank you. I'm super interested. Not sure the comparison. Scarsdale is not a densely populated. I mean, I think we're like the 10th most populated community. And if I take out the cities, we're probably in the top 5. That is a really congested, small environment. So looking at parking is essential. So I'm interested in learning more about how this actually helps. The money to me is to be discussed in regards to what action you want happening, not necessarily, this isn't the way villages should be making money for, especially not us. I mean, the money I think as you presented, if I get it right, is really a way to price things so that people take certain action. You price things low to people buy, you price things high so that they don't, you know. Something that's expensive, but you get 10 years to pay for it. If anybody's even there to enforce that and even bothers to collect it, I thought was sort of really like an interesting, different way of looking at it. Don't know. So I am interested in hearing a little bit more about it. I think the moratorium makes sense. You know, they have their purposes. I don't think we do too many of them. Because they stop things from happening, and there's always unintended consequences to moratoriums, at least the ones that I've seen, but they do have their purpose. I think I'd like to learn more about not what a moratorium is, but what might be some of the consequences for others who get caught up when moratoriums are sort of announced. So thank you. What is the next steps here?
So I want to talk about next steps. So we've basically presented an array of options, you know, opportunities. The ball's really in the board's court. report at this point.
Okay.
So if you have questions, I think it would be most helpful if you could formulate those questions and get them to us in advance of a work session so that we can use that to update the information and make sure that we're prepared. Really, it's going to be up to the board of saying that we want to go through this and then having to go, as Trustee Lopez says, get into the details here. So that would be determining how you want to do it, what areas you want to do it in, what, you know, while the fee, I think, Mayor, you're correct on the pricing to a degree, but really the goal here is to make sure that you're accommodating for the comprehensive needs, because we have space where it's physically impossible to provide parking, but we still have needs to develop or do infill or rehabilitate buildings. This provides a way to make sure that as we do that within our challenging, within our challenging current array of buildings and architecture, that we're doing it in a way that we can create opportunities to offset the burdens of parking. And really, you know, what was said 10 years ago is that we would kind of, you know, without doing this, we're kind of always in this position where we can either go forward in a way that addresses this, and it's hard to just do nothing. So I think that, again, we've given you the information. It's really up to the board to decide how they want to go forward with that. And that's where we need input from you. We can discuss that further, but it would be helpful in advance of the next work session. And I would recommend we do bring this up, you know, if we can put it on next week's work session so we maintain the momentum, but really formulate your questions, get them to us. We'll get any information we need in advance of that. But it would be time to start putting a plan together. And that would be at the board's discretion.
Okay. I don't know if we'll have it by next week, but I hear you. Okay.
We can hold it to another, we can wait till the following work session if we want to bring it up there. But, you know, I want to make balance to the, you know, maintaining the momentum if this is indeed the direction the board wants to go to, but
Right.
giving you time so we can, you know, I just would advise not to put it off too far.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And what's next? That
Okay,
was, you're done. I think Karen is done. Corporation Counsel.
Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahan, and an application for a planned waterfront special permit for 30 Water Street.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. Folks, a couple of things. We did receive on behalf of Wilder Balter, their application for a planned waterfront special permit with regard to 30 Water Street. There is no action that the board has to take at this time. It gets referred to the planning board along with the site plan application. It is my understanding that in fact 30 Water Street is on for the March planning board meeting, and the planning board will provide a recommendation to the board that it will then come back to the board to hold a public hearing with regard to the planned waterfront special permit.
Which board is
So,
holding the public hearing?
The Board of Trustees, Mayor.
Okay.
The planning board holds a public hearing with regard to the
Got it.
site plan. So there's no action by the board required tonight. Tonight's agenda has some resolutions that were discussed in work session last week, including cabaret license with regard to 3 Westerly, 2 tax certiorari settlements, a small claims assessment review settlement, authorizing the village manager to sign an agreement with Collier's Engineering and Design with regard to the 5 corners, and also 2 projects, 2 contracts, which I think the board heard about both yesterday and today, both relating to the installation of solar panels, one downtown near the train station, and the other at the operations center. And these are both to authorize the manager to sign the necessary agreements with those vendors. On another note, the mayor, you did mention that yesterday started Women's History Month. My daughter is a second grade teacher down county, and read to her class the children's version of the biography of Justice Ginsburg. And at the end of it, my daughter said, you know, it's unfortunate, but I just want to let you know that Justice Ginsburg died recently. And one of her students burst out into tears and was inconsolable. It was like beyond belief. After that episode, one of the students raised their hand and says, well, why isn't there a men's history month? And so my daughter said to the class, why do you think that is? And one of my daughter's brightest students raised her hand and said, very simply, boys are stinky. And my daughter said, you know what? There was no response to that. On that, I leave you and wish you all a good night.
I have to say that I've actually read a lot about these months that have been done by Congress and the pros and cons of segmenting out all these things. So it's in and of itself, it's an interesting conversation of good intentions and whether that is what we should be doing. So I do find it actually interesting on so much of this is really about schools. It's really not about everybody else, but it really is about what should be taught in curriculum in schools and focused upon and how it changes and when they were voted on by Congress and all that sort of stuff. So I actually find it sort of in and of itself interesting, but second graders are sort of great. They really like sort of see things the way they see. They're not tainted yet. I like that. Okay. When did you get the application from Walter?
It was
With this-
it was a letter that was sent. I believe it was the end of last week. It's a 2-page letter from their engineer,
Mhm.
just basically doing that. And the check I think has been received or is about to be
Right.
received because they have.
And
they've
when
been
we did all
involved.
these presentations, was that actually ever brought up, the request that there was going to be more units than the 109 we all talked about? This piece of it, or is this totally new?
No, this is with regard to the density that they need for the location in terms of the number of units that's provided for in the LATA agreement as of right now. To get the density, they need the planned waterfront permit to be granted by the Board of Trustees.
So Mayor, may I?
Well, I don't think we should be getting into this. This is
No, I
I think
totally
I think
understand.
the process should go and then it'll come back to the board.
So that's one of my questions, I guess, for Stuart. I have more to say, but you know, I'm gonna hold all my thoughts for next time for your request, Mayor. So Stuart, based on the timeline that they have, the presentation that they're pending presentations to the planning board, when do you expect for them to come back in front of the village board to ask for the special permit on the density?
Only after the planning board has, I have to go check the regular, I think they may have up to 90 days, but they have to have a complete, and Jaime, you can help me with this. They have to have a complete site plan, application before the planning board that has to be considered. And then a recommendation will come back to this board. So it's difficult to give you a time frame, but it's not coming back to you in March.
Okay, no, I wouldn't expect that to be the case. So Jaime, give me an imaginary timeline if everything works like a perfect project, let's say, you know, which they're not. I haven't seen a perfect project just yet. But if everything aligns, let's say, give me a timeline of a number of months, and I will not hold you to that number.
Okay, as long as you're not going to hold me to
Oh,
the number,
Just a ballpark.
then I would say that, 6 to 12 months at least. It's a long process and there are a lot of unknown environmental questions. So, but even in a perfect world with a perfect process, because of the complicating factors, I don't see how this would get done quicker than 6 months. And I could see it taking, 12 months. We've seen much smaller projects in that neighborhood that are now in March on what's currently a 3-family house with a commercial is coming on its 13th meeting. You know, we've seen other projects that are larger that have taken less time. So it just really depends on a lot of complicating factors that we don't even know. We haven't even really had any public hearings on this, so we don't know what kind of questions the community is going to ask about it. So,
Okay, fair enough. Just, you know, as I guess my concern will be for the developer to spend all this time to something that, I mean, reality, it won't be a valid conversation in 13 months from now, let's say. That's all.
This is what I call a left field conversation, because until I saw it on the agenda being presented by you, Stuart, I had not really understood that this was coming in front of us like this. So I'm going to talk to you separately. I don't want to take the meeting to do that. It's never been discussed before. In any presentations in any of the public meeting for input about sizing, about number of parking, all of that was based on a number, and now the number is changing. And I remember voting for density issues related to market rate housing, not what we're looking at here. So I'm going to be really interested in understanding how this just popped on here and what we're looking at. So I'd like to get some more information about it. Chief Sylvester, I think you're up at bat.
Sorry, you ready for my report, or were you asking a question on
Yep.
that last?
No, I'm not asking any questions. Just,
Oh.
I think you're up next.
Am I waiting for Martha, or are we going through the formalities, or you want me to just go?
Martha's doesn't have her, is on mute.
Okay.
Police Chief Kevin Sylvester.
There we go.
Just don't want to skip the line for anything. Good evening, everybody. Not a whole lot going on in the police department this month, as is customary for the end of February going into March. As it warms up, we get outside with more going on. Right now, we're completing the second half of our department's recertification for CPR and first aid. Additionally, we'll be adding training for our entire department to go through 911 diversion training for mental health through the Department of Community Mental Health. Some of our staff has gone through that. The initiative now is to train the entire staff, which will essentially just give additional options for officers to redirect mental health calls to not the crisis team, because that's not yet up and running, but there is a facility that's taking those calls now. So those people that don't necessarily need a police response can be sent on, and the training will be aimed at educating police officers and dispatchers on how to triage those calls professionally from where they sit here. This month, we've seen last month, not as much in February, but in January and the first half of February, there's a marked increase in traffic accidents, particularly on 9A. So if you may have noticed, a lot of additional officers out there. There are directed patrols assigned to strategic places throughout the town and village to address some of that. And we're looking over the next couple of weeks to check back on stats and see if we can reduce the number of traffic accidents. We do encourage people to slow down and not run red lights. To that end, next week, Sergeant Mayorano will be attending the Lifesavers Conference in Chicago. That's on a grant fund from the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee. He'll be going along with members from the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police, a board of which I sit, an organization of which I sit on the board for. That is the largest conference in the nation for highway safety professionals. So looking forward for him to be coming back with additional resources, concepts, and strategies for addressing some of our traffic problems. Next week, we'll be back in AMD for another program with youth through the schools. And that's all for tonight.
Nice. Have you seen any more accidents or anything based on the conditions of the roads? Because I've seen it on my commute on the Taconic and Sprain, where people's tires are actually, and it causes accidents, obviously, have come off because they're also going faster than they should be going through a village. But is that, in your opinion, causing some of the problems? Is there solutions to it?
I'm not sure that I could speak to that. You're talking about dozens of events, and everyone has their own unique individual causes. And I don't believe the roads are necessarily the main cause here. I believe the human error just tends to be the bigger issue.
Got it.
Mayor, this
Okay.
is the time of year, though, that I start getting the notices of claim for tires blown out and potholes. And Unless there's prior written notice, they all get denied.
Yeah, well, this year seems to be especially bad. Not quite
Right.
sure why. It's like the Northeast, it snows and rains and we put salt every year, but it seems to be really deep gashes. And I actually see entire tires, not flats, actually off of cars. So that only gets done, I think, not only, but for the most part, especially on the newer cars in those potholes. But okay. I thought maybe we would get enlightenment, but I guess the chief is right. There's no way of really knowing how these accidents are actually happening. All righty. Thank you, chief.
Okay, is there anybody here present who would like to make an organizational announcement? If so,
Yes.
please raise your virtual hand and just please keep in mind that you have 2 minutes to speak. Thank you.
I thought you were going to make an organizational announcement, Jamie, and then I realized it's because you see Mr. Dewey's hand.
Yes, you are
Okay.
right. I am so sorry, Martha. I'm going to bring you over, Steve, if you can turn your camera on. Not sure why it won't. Oh, there you are.
Steve, you still have to take, there you go. I think we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Can't see me. Well, why not?
And I haven't seen you in ages, so it would be nice.
Start video. How about we do that? There we are. Let me know when you're ready.
We are ready, Mr.
Good
Dewey.
evening, everyone. Thank you all for your service to the community. Happy Ash Wednesday. Good to see you participating there, Martha. And nice shout out and thank you for the prayers for Ukrainians. Our fellow neighbor on Martin Road, her parents-in-law got out of the northern end of Poland 2 nights ago and into Belgium last night. So horrific things going on there. So our prayers are out to them. Hey, my announcement is from the Ossining Fire Department. We are glad to announce that on April 24th, between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., we're going to hold our annual recruitment drive, which includes kind of like, an open house. And that will occur, as I said, April 24th, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at 25 State Street, the fire headquarters, in hopes to get recruits and to hope to get younger folks into our venturing crew. But please put the word out there. As you know, all volunteer organizations are hurting these days for volunteers to help them, whether it's ambulance, fire, whatever. But Ossining especially, we've had a great camaraderie and personnel, but the numbers are starting to dwindle. So anything we can do to help promote, get folks into our association, it would be greatly appreciated. And please get the word out if we can, Bob or Mayor, if you get that out on the web blast that you do each week, that would be appreciated as well. Yeah. And we thank you for your time and thank you. Good to see everybody.
Great. So date, time, place, maybe a couple of bullets. Have you met Mike Garcia from the Youth Bureau at this point, Steve?
No, I'll have myself or Mackenzie or through Bob Fritchie, we could certainly reach out to him.
Yeah, I just think that he's setting some wonderful stuff up and it might be just an opportunity for, it's a youth bureau after all. Some of them may also have siblings, cousins, whatever. It's like, just getting the word out is all. And Anna Guzman's organization as well. Do you know Anna Guzman, Steve?
No,
Okay.
Both names I've heard of, but I don't think I've met them.
It would be good. It would be good for members of the community. I think maybe Jamie has all the contact for both of those folks and she could send them to you, but I think it's worthwhile to just reach out to more folks as you desirous of that, because that's why you're here tonight, in fact, is to exactly accomplish that. So thank you. I see Bob wants to say something.
Yeah, it's just a point of clarity. It's 21 State Street, 25.
25 State Street. Yeah.
You'd be showing up at the apartment house at 25, so it's 21 State Street.
I'm just used to the calls over there, sorry.
Yeah, so it's 21, but you get the information to Jamie Hoffman, communication person. She'll also get you contact. I think making the personal contact with a couple of organizations would not hurt.
I'll do some introductions for you tomorrow. But also, if you have a flyer that you're doing, we can also put it on social media. And if you don't have a flyer,
Steve Fasney has the flyer out, right?
Mackenzie just made it today, actually. She's going to go actually walking. Mackenzie Farrell, great firefighter, and also a great example of getting females into our department. We're one of the rare departments in Westchester County, if not New York State, that has numbers of female firefighters and good firefighters at that. but Mackenzie's gonna walk the stores, I think on Main and Croton. She just created the flyer this morning, so I'll get that over to you, Jamie,
Okay,
as soon as I can get that from her.
great. If you want to have her talk to me also, I could discuss with her where we could place it.
I appreciate it. Thank
For
you.
marketing. Okay, no problem.
Thank you, sir.
And final
Just-
organizational announcement, if I may, since I get another
Oh,
2 minutes.
more. Okay.
Just finished up with the Landlord Tenant Relations Committee. Wanted to remind everybody, we're still an active organization. We are still taking on a lot of calls, especially if there's heat issues or other issues. We are open to all landlords, tenants, even neighbors to those buildings to assist you with any landlord tenant needs, including mediation. And a reminder that we do work with the building department to help with any of those heating matters. We're not out of the winter time yet. And if there are heating issues or other matters, we're glad to help out all of our neighbors here in Ossining towards that end. So thank you very much. We have LTRC@villageofossining.org for any other information, or contact Village Hall for any other information about what our council does. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Steve, are you full now? Landlord tenant? You're still looking for people?
Still looking for people. I think we still have 3 positions open. And we do have at least a quorum of personnel to maintain our meetings. But certainly the more people get involved in this area with landlord tenant, it helps out I think our community as a whole. So still
Okay.
a couple of positions open.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.
Okay, going on to public comment on agenda items. Is there anybody here who would like to address the board on any of the resolutions on tonight's agenda? If so, please raise your virtual hand and keep in mind that we have a 4-minute opportunity to address the board.
I'm going to bring over Mr. Fry again and Mr. Fry. Okay, if you can turn on your camera and unmute.
Okay, I think I'm back.
Mhm.
First, let me start off by complimenting Jamie Hoffman, Communications Director. I spend an enormous amount of time on the website, and I find it so tremendously easy to use. Being able to go through, click on the calendar, find the meeting, click on the meeting, go to the agenda, click on the agenda, and find the documents. It's fantastic. And I think also, I get the push emails, subscribe to a number of things. I enjoy Mayor Rika Levin's mayor's message every week. So you're doing a great job. All of the trustees, I think you're doing a fine job. But I especially wanted to congratulate Maddie on the spectacular presentation she made on the parking in lieu. We went through that in Terrytown. It's an important concept. Here's an interesting statistic. Most shopping centers figure every parking place needs to generate about $3,000 per day in sales. So parking is something not only to, obviously residents need parking places, visitors, walking in the park need a parking place. But if you don't have those parking places, you will thwart all of your efforts for economic development. You'll thwart your downtown revitalization. And you can go so far as Maddie had tabulated, simply releasing people from that obligation, 8 with parking waivers and 32 with parking variances. But at the end of the day, if you let 10 people slide every year for 10 years, you're 100 parking places too short. And if you look at the alternative as a developer, I represent both the public interest and developers, and I'll be coming in front of a number of boards. It's a delicate thing. First of all, if you want to go out and you have to buy 12 parking places, you don't have them on your site, you can do it within 200 feet under your local code. But go ahead and buy a piece of land large enough for 12 parking places and a 24-foot wide aisle. You'll find it's going to cost you $500,000 and $600,000. So when you look at that, wow, 12 spaces, 600, that's $50,000 a space. And no matter how you do it, it used to be $10,000 for a flat land space and $30,000 for a space in a garage. That's long ago. That's long ago. So the acquisition cost of the land is tremendous. And if the village is donating that, providing that land has to generate a reasonable return for the village taxpayers that own all of the land. And it has to be a tremendous benefit to the shop owners that can count on a lot more restaurant guests, a lot more visitors, a lot more retail shops. So it's a great thing. The village of Ossining have been involved in it since 1977, and the parking problem is getting worse. And I'm so happy to see you're all working on this downtown revitalization initiative. And a critical part of that is what you're working on, the parking in lieu fund. I also strongly recommend a review of some of your, there is a situation, there's several situations at Ossining now, including one on Water Street. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr.
is the
Fry,
timer-
yeah, there's a 4-minute sort of limit.
Oh,
Try to stay with that, so thank you.
good, I'll
Jamie.
wrap it up. So
Thank you,
that
sir.
is the situation, the current code that you showed is for existing buildings. And there are good reasons why that is just in those 3 zones. But there's an application for waivers where there is no existing building. And I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else you see, Jamie? No? Okay, so we're going to village board resolution.
I'm
sorry.
sorry, do we want to do one last call? Just because I think Mr. Fry
think-
had meant to be, I'm moving him back over. I think he meant to be in the other space. Okay, it doesn't look like.
I think we're good.
Okay. Village board resolutions, approval of minutes, March 16th, 2022. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves minutes of the February 16th, 2022 regular meeting as presented. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Approval of voucher detail on March 2nd, 2022. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the voucher detail report dated March 2nd, 2022 in the amount of $885,508.78. Do you have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments?
Yes. Dell, as always, is I love the summaries because the anxiety, seeing $800,000. It was like I thought we were going down, now we're going up. No, is thank you for all that stuff. Is obviously does additional trucks, additional equipment, some stuff from 2021. Also, they're being part of the voucher package itself. So I don't have any questions. If not, as you know, I will email you some of my questions over the weekend. But thank you so much for all the hard work that you guys do there.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, support for the Empire State Campaign for Childcare. Whereas childcare is a public good, and whereas childcare should be free and accessible to individuals residing in New York State, and whereas families should not have to go through a means testing process to receive free childcare, and whereas families should be empowered to choose a childcare program that meets their child's needs, and whereas childcare teachers and providers should be compensated comparable to their peers in public education. Now therefore be it resolved that the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees calls upon Governor Hochul and the state legislator to invest $5 billion in the childcare sector in the fiscal year 2023 enacted budget to ensure that all families have access to childcare and that providers are adequately compensated, and be it further resolved that the Board of Trustees calls upon Governor Hochul and the state legislature to agree upon and develop a plan to expand access to childcare to all who need it, and be it further resolved that the Board of Trustees supports efforts to provide universal childcare to all children and families in New York State, and be it further resolved that the Board of Trustees will be proactive in its efforts to promote and advocate for universal childcare, and be it further resolved that upon approval, this resolution will be sent to Governor Kathy Hochul, Assemblywoman Sandra Galiff, State Senator Elijah Ray Melnick, and State Senator Jabri Brisport, Chair of the Senate Committee on Children and Families, who has made childcare a top priority following his childcare listening tour in 2021. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Need a second.
Second,
I'll second.
Comments? So I think there was lots of conversation for those that follow our meetings, lively conversations, sort of new and bold idea, even bigger than what's being asked of us here. I'm sorry, am I on the wrong one? No, got it. So I'm flipping on another screen here. So I think we're in support.
Okay.
And I'm happy to say that, sorry, Martha, I'm out of sync with you tonight. Sorry about that. And so very proud to have been part of the conversation, I hope, and wish more on this to come in the future and to be taken very seriously. So Martha, you're on.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
aye,
Opposed? Okay. Resolution approving 2022 cabaret license for Ossining Restaurant LLC doing business as 3 Westerly Bar and Grill, 3 Westerly Road, Ossining, New York. Resolved that pursuant to the code, the Board of Trustees hereby approves a cabaret license for 2022 for Ossining Rest LLC doing business as 3 Westerly Bar and Grill as follows. Ossining Rest LLC doing business as 3 Westerly Bar and Grill, days and hours, Friday and Saturday, 12 p.m. to 1 a.m., Sunday to Thursday, 12 p.m. to midnight. Type of music, entertainment, restaurant, live music. And be it further resolved that pursuant to section 100-9 of the Village Code, the Board of Trustees may revoke or suspend any cabaret license issued under chapter 100 where the license was obtained by fraud or false representation of fact or failing to comply with the provisions of chapter 171 licenses. All those in favor? I'm sorry.
Aye.
I'm second a motion. I'm sorry.
So move.
second,
Comments? Martha?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
aye,
Opposed? Okay. Resolution authorizing tax certiorari settlement and payment for NNG Realty LLC 238 North Highland Avenue, whereas a tax certiorari proceeding was instituted against the Board of Assessors and/or the assessor of the town of Ossining and the Board of Assessment Review by NNG Realty LLC regarding petitioner's property situated at 238 North Highland Avenue in the Village of Ossining and designated as section 89.11, block 1, lot 10 for the 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021 assessment years under index numbers 64362/2016, 65511-2017, 65888-2018, 66530-2019, 61003/2020, and 62904/2021. And whereas the Village of Ossining ceased being a tax assessing unit in 1989 and now adopts the Town of Ossining assessment roll for the Village of Ossining as prepared by the assessor of the Town of Ossining for all subsequent years. And whereas on January 19, 2020, a consent judgment was entered in favor of the petitioner NNG Realty LLC against the Village of Ossining, correcting, fixing, and reducing the assessed valuations of the aforesaid real property and improvements situated thereon, as set forth in Schedule A, annexed here to. And resolved that the village treasurer shall make a notion in the margin of the assessment rolls of the Village of Ossining that said assessments were reduced in payment of a refund of the overpayment of real property taxes are made pursuant to said judgment. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments? Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
aye,
Opposed? Okay. Resolution authorizing tax certiorari settlement and payment for Jefferson House Associates LLC 151 South Highland Avenue, 71 Charter Circle and 81 Charter Circle. Whereas a tax certiorari proceeding was instituted against the assessor of the Town of Ossining, the Board of Assessment Review of the Town of Ossining, and the Town of Ossining by Jefferson House Associates LLC regarding petitioner's property situated at 151 South Highland Avenue in the Village of Ossining, designated as section 97.11, block 4, lot 33, 71 Charter Circle in the Village of Ossining, and designated as section 97.15, block 3, lot 32, and 81 Charter Circle in the Village of Ossining, and designated as section 97.15, block 3, lot 33 for the 2020 and 2021 assessment years under the index numbers 61495/2020 and 63589-2021. And whereas the Village of Ossining ceased being a tax assessing unit in 1989 and now adopts the Town of Ossining assessment rule for the Village of Ossining as prepared by the assessor of the Town of Ossining for all subsequent years. And whereas on January 19th, 2022, the consent judgment was entered in favor of the petitioner Jefferson House Associates LLC against the Village of Ossining, correcting, fixing, and reducing the assessed valuations of the aforesaid real property and the improvements situated thereon, as set forth in Schedule A in Annex Year 2. And resolved that the village treasurer shall make a notion in the margin of the assessment rolls of the Village of Ossining, the said assessment reduced in payment of a refund of the overpayment of real property taxes was made pursuant to said judgment. Do you have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Comments? Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Authorization of small claim assessment review payments for 2021 assessment year. Whereas certain small claim assessment review SCAR proceedings were commenced in the Supreme Court of the State of New York, County of Westchester against the Town of Ossining by the following property owners for the 2021 assessment year: Mohammed Qayyum, 33 Meadowbrook Drive, 89.07-1-68, index number 92992/2021. Kahan Ira, 25 Birch Court, 89.20-3-63.4, index number 92522/2021. Gustavo Tejera, 37 Revolutionary Road, 97.15-3-7.2, index number 92526/2021. Rosemary Baker, 1 Gilbert Park, 97.07-7-37, index number 80497/2021. And whereas the Village of Ossining ceased being a tax assessing unit in 1989 and now adopts the Town of Ossining assessment rule for the Village of Ossining, correcting, fixing, and reducing the assessed valuations of the aforesaid properties and improvements situated thereon, as set forth in Schedule A, Annex Tier 2. And whereas the above referenced SCAR proceedings are resolved by stipulations approved by the presiding judicial hearing officers, and resolved that a notation shall be made in the margin of the assessment roll that the said assessments were reduced and that payment of refunds for the overpayment of real property taxes was made pursuant to the stipulations. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments? Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Authorizing village manager to sign an agreement with Colliers Engineering and Design, resolved that upon the review with the Corporation Counsel, the village manager is authorized to sign an agreement with Colliers and Land Surveying for 100 Columbus Avenue, Suite 180E, Valhalla, New York, 10595, to provide professional services for the preparation of roadway improvement plans for the intersection of Main Street and Spring Street. And be further resolved that the services to be provided are detailed in the February 15th, 2022 proposal letter. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Need a set. Thank you. Comments?
Yes. I saw Paul here early. There you go, Paul. So I'm assuming you had conversations with that engineer firm?
Yes, as we discussed in previous work session, this is the firm that worked on the original concept of the intersection improvement. They are Mazer Engineering, but it's Collier Engineering. It was a conglomerate that purchased Mazer, so it's a DBA Mazer Engineering for this project. And the agreement, I'm sorry, that we reviewed in the work session is still being tweaked a little bit with some legalese that I'm coordinating with Stuart and the counsel from the firm. But once we get that ironed out, which is probably going to be within a few days, we'd like to execute that and continue on this project.
Great. So I have two questions for you. One, whenever that happens, would you mind giving us an update of a timeline when they'll be able to bring something in front of us, I guess? The second question, and probably is more to Stuart and you as well. One of the things that I always had asked is when we do contracts like this, that any drawings or any documents, we should be getting hard copies, and especially because if they're going to be doing any renderings, any 3D presentations, any CAD files, I would like that to be part of the project and when they finalize everything. So I would like to have a copy of those. If it's not part of the original agreement, I would like that to be as part of the original, as part of this new agreement, I guess.
Yeah. we remember that original comment when you first made it. It really came on the heels of our previous operations center project, and we have those drawings now, so they'll be useful to us someday. And I know that Stuart incorporated just that comment in his list of comments to their legal department, so we will be sure to do that. That will be in there.
Great, thank you.
And just to, while I'm speaking, just to refresh everybody's memory, I'm looking on my phone here now, the anticipated consulting cost for the project, including services during construction, is $64,750.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mayor, may I? With regard to timeline, I don't want to really speak to the construction timeline as of yet, because that's still being determined, the breadth of the scope, but the engineering timeline, we can anticipate within 3 months having something pretty close to contract documents and bid contract documents. But just like we did the last time, we're going to take 50 and 80% drawings in front of you all, so you have your arms around exactly what we're doing down there. But again, I'm just a little reserved with regard to construction timelines, because procurement is really all over the page lately, and how long things take and lead times. So we don't want to predict that, since there are some items on there that potentially have long lead times, specifically the signalization and instrumentation work that's necessary. So we'll have a better handle on that when it comes time to go out to bid, and I'll keep you versed on it accordingly.
Yeah, but the drawings and stuff, when you do have something that's workable, I'd like to see it nicely displayed at the 5-way intersection, so the public knows what our plans are.
Understood.
And when they get updated, we'll update them. It's a couple $100 for, the sign. I think it's helpful for the public to know and to visually be able to look at it. Yes, they could do it digitally, but it's not the same as walking by there and saying, okay, that's why there are people measuring things. Okay, that's why this thing's out of place for 3 weeks. Okay, they're working on something, that kind of a thing. We have more people walking that 5-corner intersection than we do watching our Wednesday evening get-togethers. So shocking as that may sound, but let's put it where people are. And at some point we'll meet down there and really get a good look at what we're thinking about. That was super helpful in the past. So this is a big project that I think the board is very interested in. So I appreciate the path forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
opposed? Opposed? Okay. A resolution authorizing the purchase of sanitation trucks in and for the village of Ossining, Westchester County, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $610,000, and authorizing, subject to permissive referendum, the issuance of $610,000 serial bonds of said village to pay the cost thereof. Be it resolved by the affirmative vote of not less than 2/3 of the total voting strength of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining, Westchester County, New York, as follows. The purchase of sanitation trucks in and for the Village of Ossining, Westchester County, New York, including costs incidental thereto, is hereby authorized, subject to permissive referendum, at a maximum estimated cost of $610,000. The plan for the financing of aforesaid maximum estimated cost is by the issuance of $610,000 serial bonds of said village, hereby authorized to be issued therefore pursuant to the provisions of the local finance law. It is hereby determined that the period of probable usefulness of the aforesaid class of objects or purpose is 15 years pursuant to subdivision 28 of paragraph A of section 11, the local finance law. It is hereby further determined that the maximum maturity of the serial bonds herein authorized will exceed 5 years. Let me scroll down. This resolution is adopted subject to permissive referendum. So let me just, do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Second.
Yeah, any comments?
Choose one, Marita. Just is okay. Just choose. Just choose
She
one.
does. She always does. What, are there any comments? I have a
Oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, Mayor. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have a question. Dale, what's the inflation rate at now?
I know when I asked about, excuse me, the interest rates, it was 60 basis points higher than the last time for our borrow power. So hopefully we can hold true to that when we actually go to get the funding.
Right, but do you know what the inflation rate? Because on the news this morning, it's the highest it's been in 40 years. Now, I understand it's a lot of commentary because the president did his big speech last night. So everybody's out like, you know, with the microscopes, but we actually are seeing inflation go up. And I think that also increases the cost of things. It's not just the borrowing dollars, it's also the cost of everything. Right, that's what inflation rates mean. So I'd like to have a sense, and I'd like to know if you're adjusting. Because every time Paul's going out to buy something, it isn't just supply side stuff, which I think will come to an end, Paul. But I think it's also like, did we adjust our budgets for, if it's 6%, did we do 6%? Not the fund rates, but the cost of doing business rates. Did you make adjustments for
Right.
that, or?
Yeah.
Because
So
otherwise, we're going to come back with new requests every time we agree to something. 2 weeks later, we're going to come back that, oh, you know what? It's 610,000 and not 600. And we're just spending all this time. We just should look at everything and say it's going to be 68% more and call it
Yeah.
a day.
Good point. Good points. And what happened with this particular bond that we're presenting tonight, it's covering the cost of the 2 sanitation vehicles that were requested in the capital ask going to 2022. And much like the aforementioned vehicles in Trustee Casada's discussion on the voucher detail, the reason it was so high, we have vehicles on there that you approved in the 2021 capital ask that are actually finally getting delivered. We anticipate the same thing here, where these trucks are very likely not going to come in and get built because we're buying a chassis off of a Sourcewell contract, which is a purchasing conglomerate similar to OGS. So we're buying a chassis and then a separate body, and then they're putting those two together. And the original chassis that we were going to purchase for the 2 garbage trucks, when we gave you the original $600 plus or minus $1,000 budget for the 2 vehicles, actually did escalate and pushed us out of the budget. So we're putting different chassis on this truck, and they're still good chassis, and we own chassis. And this particular chassis is Freightliner versus the Mack, which we have on our other garbage trucks. But the Freightliners are also good chassis, and separately, they're $70,000 cheaper. So we were still able to put the 2 vehicles together within the originally asked budget. So, yeah.
I just think, Dale,
and because it's on a purchasing contract, we are creating that contract and purchasing for that. So we're not gonna feel it like we could possibly feel it on a construction project where you don't know where materials are going to be at the time of bidding.
Right. Yeah.
So adjustments are going to have to be, or else we're going to be having, anyway, I've already set my mind. And you know what makes me so happy? 5 years ago, I wouldn't have understood a word you just said about the chassis, and now I do. This job is great. Like garbage trucks, who knew? But it's like, and I'm not being funny. I know Victoria loved doing budgets. I love this stuff of actually understanding how things are put together, and you know, how smartly I think some of the stuff you do and the adjustments you make. But I do think inflation's going up. Not a political statement. I just think it is.
The CPI increase for the last 12 months at this point in time, this was a February 10th report, was 7.5%.
Oh,
increase.
I was wrong. I thought it was 6%. Wow. Okay, that's even higher. Okay, and I think
7.5.
Westchester is actually, you look at national, right? You're not looking at Westchester.
We look at the Northeast, so it's a part of New Jersey, New York.
Okay, so that's fair, because Boston's going to play a role in that, and they're just as bad as we are. So it's a pretty high inflation rate, and when oil goes up the way it's been going, that's my PSA for
Mhm.
Go Solar. But anyway, okay, I just think instead of having this conversation about everything, we should try to figure out how to do one blanket, everything's going up 8% and call it a day. If that's at all possible, I'm not sure that it is. Okay, we're gonna vote. Garbage trucks, all good. Glad to hear we're getting new ones. Never know what you do with old ones, but you take them apart is really what you do. And we're in the middle of vote. Martha?
Okay, so this is a roll call vote. So trustee Quesada,
Aye.
trustee Lopez,
Aye.
trustee White,
Aye.
trustee Fritchie,
Aye.
Mayor Levin.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, finance establishment of 2022 sanitation vehicles for debt financing sources. Whereas village management wishes to establish a capital project to purchase 2 sanitation trucks not to exceed $610,000, which is part of the village's 2022 capital plan and designated to be financed by issuance of sewer bonds. Now therefore be it resolved, capital projects and capital project budgets are established as follows. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I feel like we just discussed it, so thanks.
Okay. Establishment of a CSC task force resolution for the village and town of Ossining. Whereas the village of Ossining believes that climate change poses a real and increasing threat to our local and global environment and is primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels. And whereas we believe the scale of greenhouse gases, CHG, emissions reductions required for climate stabilization will require substantial and sustained efforts. And whereas the state of New York in 2009 enacted the Climate Smart Communities Program to engage and enable local governments throughout the state to take actions which collectively will help to reduce GHG's emissions and mitigate the adverse effects of climate change. And whereas in 2009, the village and town of Ossining have each adopted the New York State Climate Smart Communities Pledge and have designated as registered New York State Climate Smart Communities. And whereas in 2020, the village and town of Ossining have also each adopted a resolution in support of Cure 100, Communities United to Reduce Emission by 100%, recognizing the ability and responsibility of local communities to reduce carbon emissions in line with New York State's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, CLCPA. Now therefore be resolved that the village of Ossining, in order to participate fully in the Climate Smart Communities Program of New York State, moves to establish a joint village/town Ossining Climate Smart Communities Task Force comprised of not less than 1 member of the Board of Trustees in the village of Ossining and 1 member of the town board of the town of Ossining, along with the members of the village and town planning board, the village environmental advisory council, and the town environmental advisory committee, and members of Green Ossining. And be it further resolved, the village board of the village of Ossining moves to appoint assistant village manager Manny Zahach and town budget officer Victoria Caffarelli to serve as joint coordinators of the Ossining CSC task force. And be it further resolved, the village board of the village of Ossining will create a CSC green team comprised of employees of the village and town of Ossining to help to coordinate and implement actions taken by the village and town as part of their CSC pledge. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments? Maddie, how about you tell us what your role will be in this?
Sure. Good evening again, everybody. So the Climate Smart Communities Program, as the resolution states, originated back in 2009. The village of Ossining was one of the first communities to get certified, and that was great. But unfortunately, our documentation of our fantastic green and sustainable initiative stopped right there. So the next step, which is mandatory, we cannot go any further without doing this, is to establish the CSC task force and to have a coordinator for that task force. It was recommended by our coordinator at NYSERDA that because Green Ossining has been sort of the spearhead of many of the environmental initiatives in Ossining, that the town and village form a joint task force for the purpose of documenting past actions. So we probably have about 2 years of work in front of us before we start documenting anything new that the village is doing or considering doing in the short term. And my role is really just to herd the cats, to make sure that we're complying with the CSC guidelines, to make sure that we're meeting. I think we need to meet at least twice per year, but I suspect we're going to be meeting much more often than that, keeping minutes of those meetings and so on and so forth. So as I mentioned to the board in the email, the staff member who's going to be joining me is our planner, Jaime Martinez. Mayor Levin has agreed to be the Board of Trustees member, and we'll be joined by, we have a confirmed member of the EAC. We're still waiting to confirm the planning board and some members of Green Ossining Ossining, and then of course our counterparts in the town. So it's exciting. We're ready to go. The town tried to do this a few years ago, and it sort of lost momentum. So I think we're well positioned to get started on this now.
Okay, at the end of all this, what do we win?
Bragging rights. The reason we started with clean energy communities, which you've heard me talk a lot about over the past years, because there are grants associated with those actions. Climate smart communities opens the door for you to be eligible for different types of grants, and certainly gives you extra points in the kudos category, but there are no dollar amounts associated with any of what we're doing. And it is quite a bit more complicated. The CEC is pretty straight to the point. The CSC is definitely a lot more nuanced and detailed. It's going to take us a while, but we're up for it.
Right, but I think part of it is the grants, right?
Right. So it will allow us to tap different pools of funding by saying that we're a CSC certified or silver or bronze community, but there's no dollar for dollar guarantee for completing these actions the way that there were in clean energy communities. We're getting pretty tapped out on that.
Right. So I just want to get for the record, one of the things that I find interesting with government is there are front doors or side doors. They're all perfectly fine. It's part of a democratic process. But the advantages that cities have is you'll notice New Rochelle gets, we get 10 million. We're jumping for joy for like a year and a half now. But New Rochelle at the same time got like 7 million for like writing a piece. I mean, they're just cities. Their infrastructure is different. They're part of a different ball game altogether. Their mayors are full-time paid employees with staff. There's just like a whole different qualification. So for villages, to be in the game, I think this is one of the paths. I'm not saying this would be the only path, and it's a lot of work, but if we're going to do work, and if I join one more committee, there's got to be an end game to it. I think the end game is that it just opens doors, is the way I'm understanding it. Because if it's not doing that, we wouldn't be doing this. So it's opening doors. One grant begets another grant. That's why we've gotten so many more grants under like this administration, under this staff. And we're getting better and better at it. And you just get your name on the radar screen. And I've always thought this was what cities have an advantage over villages, even if they're small cities. So I think I'm saying it correctly, Maddie, that because I don't want to make promises, but I just think it's a path that leads to something on behalf of the village, and not just this year under this administration, but it's something that picks up steam. It's like being a tree city. I first heard tree city, I'm like, okay, big whoop. I mean, you get trees, like how important is that? Well, aside from how important it is for the environment, it puts you on a radar screen with players, and you start seeing other grants coming your way. You start being just in front of people's faces when they think of you for different things. You start wanting people to partner with you in different initiatives. You start getting more knowledgeable. So I think it's well worth the effort. I appreciate it. We'll get better. We'll understand more. We might rotate people through this so people can learn more about the environment, not just me. So I'm excited. I feel like it's another new path, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate Ms. Caffarelli for also for the town. And I think it is nice to have a town and village, because working on a project the way we do on the community center, yes, it's a little bit more of a headache sometimes on one hand. On the other hand, I think it's much more productive in certain cases. So thank you. Looking forward to this. One more
If I might say one more thing, Mayor,
yeah.
You're absolutely correct. It does open doors, and just being able to write in a grant proposal that we're bronze certified or silver certified
Right.
is sure to give us extra consideration. But I also do want to point out that when we did a walkthrough with our NYSERDA coordinator, we are likely already eligible for silver status, and we would be one of 10 communities in all of New York State to be able to say that. Most of the rest are counties. There's 2 cities and 2 villages, which both happen to be in Westchester. So again, similar to clean energy communities, we've been doing this work for many years. We just haven't documented it properly. So our hope is that we'll be able to get to silver status probably by the end of 2023, which again is going to put us in the highest tier among New York State communities in doing so.
It's fantastic. It's like when Leeds started. I remember when that started. Oh, it's a little something. And now it's like every developer, status, like I'm a Leeds Platinum, Gold, whatever it is. It really is great. So I appreciate it. And again, you know, it takes a lot of work, and oftentimes cities have staff and villages don't. So you really have to make sure you know where you're spending your time, with whom, and what you want to get out of it. So this, I think this is all good stuff. And I think we're also going to learn a lot, which is great. So thank you. Just wanted to make it clear so people understand why this is even here tonight. Thank you, Maddie.
Sure.
And I think we can move forward. Martha.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Authorizing the village manager to sign a solar project site access and due diligence agreement with Distributed Solar Projects LLC. Resolved that upon review of the Corporation Council, the village manager is authorized to sign the site project site access and due diligence agreement with Distributed Solar Projects LLC, 200 Harborside Drive, Suite 200, Schenectady, New York, 12305, and be it further resolved that the purpose of the agreement is to allow Distributed Solar Projects LLC to enter two village-owned parcels, 31 Water Street, 97.00-1-1, and Seco Road, 97.07-1-16, to conduct tests of the parcels to evaluate the feasibility of erecting a photovoltaic system for the village as part of the community distributed generation project. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments? Aside from this is looking at solar panels on properties in the village, to put it simply. I think the next one is going to be
I have
related.
a question. 31 Water Street and then the Secor Road. What village-owned properties are these?
It's the train station parking lots. So I can pull up a map, but I also do want to mention that the proprietor of DSD is here with us on the call. Would you like me to bring him over in case folks have any questions for him specifically?
Well, it would be nice if he showed up, which we appreciate. Please bring him
is
over.
here.
I don't know if we have questions, but it'd be
Okay,
nice
David,
to meet him.
hang on. Let's see if we can make this work.
I've
I
All
got
see
right,
Brock
David, you're
Gibby.
over. If you want to turn on
David's
your
over. I'm
camera.
trying to bring Sam over.
I don't know who Sam is.
Oh,
I see
then.
Brock D.
Oops.
Gibby.
Yeah, nope, we want David Eisenbud. David, if you could turn your camera on and come off of mute, that would be helpful. Okay, perhaps he, oh, there he goes.
Almost. Where is he?
Hey,
There he
David.
is.
There we go. Hi, everybody.
Good evening. Nice to see you. You've
Thank you
been
for having
listening?
me.
Do you
Yes, I've been
want to
following
add
along. I think
maybe
you're
a
running
few
a
words?
very thorough meeting. So this is preliminary. I am part of a large organization called Distributed Solar Development. We are headquartered in Schenectady. We came out of GE. We have done plenty of work through Westchester County in partnership with NIPA and some other communities. Recently completed a large portfolio of projects in the city of White Plains using solar canopies. And we would applaud moving to the next step and being able to evaluate your parking lots and come back with our findings. So thank you.
David, were you part of the project across from on Gedney? There's a park there and it's a municipal something or other in the back. Is that something
Yes,
you were
we
involved
did.
in?
We did the recycling center, Chapman Place Garage, a number of other sites through the city of White Plains. That's right.
And you focus on canopies. That's what you do.
We do all
Canopy
types
solar,
of
I guess.
installations. We specialize in canopies, and we
Okay.
do community solar. We do commercial, industrial, other sectors as well. We're about 180 people in our group. Plenty of engineering muscle, and the financing where we own and operate projects on behalf of our host clients and customers.
And you have also presence, not only virtual, but here in the area?
We do. Plenty of people work in the New York area. We have a New York City office. We're headquartered in Schenectady. And again, partners in my various groups, functional groups that I'll work with on engineering and permitting and development and finance are, many are located in the regional area.
And what's your role at your company?
I am on the business origination side of our business, and I work with partner clients to move opportunities through and present offers to make solar happen.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Now I can see I drive by
Sure.
there. I'm going to actually
All right.
drive underneath the canopy in White Plains and see what it actually looks like. I feel that, there we go.
Yeah, I just wanted to pull this up really quick. I don't mean to interrupt.
What's with the
So these are
stars?
the two areas of the
Oh.
parking lot that's under consideration. So again, this is the smaller Quimby Street lot. Here's Water Street. Here's the DPW site. So the one just across from there. And then probably more likely this larger stretch of parking lot here near South Water Street.
Okay. Very nice. Okay, does anybody
right.
else have questions, folks?
Yeah, I just, I know it's early in the game. Do you have any preliminary sizes that you would be, the size of the system that will be going in?
I do. We're looking at about a half a megawatt, 500 kilowatts for the one north-south long parking lot. The other we're still evaluating. So we'll send a development engineer to take a look and come back with better findings.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, I do want to say that this is one of the items I actually do get emails on. I personally have my house solarized, but I solar panel, but this is the one I actually do get comments on. Increasingly, as universities, hospitals, etc., have used this sort of canopy methodology, and more people in our community see it. We're certainly not the first ones to think about it. I didn't realize it also when it snows and all the other stuff, it actually protects cars, less shoveling, it protects the road underneath. So people have actually written me, people who are into the environment and know that I am. So I'm looking forward to the investigation and see if it's a possibility. I don't know if it is or not, but you know,
Yep. We
looking
wouldn't
forward
have
to
taken
seeing
the
it.
step. Well, thank you. We wouldn't have taken the step here unless we had a sense there was a feasible outcome. So thank you.
Okay, great. Okay. Since
All
there,
right.
I don't think there are more questions. Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
We're in the middle of a vote of some sort. Yes, Martha?
Mhm. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Authorizing the village manager to sign the option and lease agreement with Ecogy New York LLC for the construction and operation of distributed generation facility at the Ossining Operations Center, 101 Route 98, Ossining, New York. Resolved that upon review of the Corporation Council, the village manager is authorized to sign an option and lease agreement with Ecogy New York 1 LLC, CO Ecogy Solar LLC, 315 Flatbush Avenue, Suite 393, Brooklyn, New York, 11217 to construct and operate a distributed generation facility on the roof of the Ossining Operations Center, 101 Route 9 in Ossining, New York, 90.05-1-58, and be it further resolved that upon review that by the Corporation Council, the village manager is authorized to sign such other documents as are needed to implement the agreement, including but not limited to Appendix J, New York State Standard Site Control Certification Form. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Need a second.
Second,
Thank you. And comments. I see that Brock D. Gibeon, in quotes, Ecogy, is also with us. So I'm assuming it's about this. Maybe we will bring.
All right, Brock, we're trying to move you over. There you are.
Hello all. I'm sorry, I'm driving actually. I just parked to talk to you here on my site. So I'm sorry I'm so dark here. Very thorough meeting. Thank you so much for hearing and considering this. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Village Manager, and Village Board. As you know, Ecogy developed some of the first community solar systems in Westchester County, the first ever system in the town of Ossining for Marion All Fathers and Brothers, the first system for the village of Croton on Hudson, which is also on the Department of Public Works garage. I do want to give a shout out to the village engineer, Paul, who helped us do a drone scan survey to collect 13,000 images of the roof and create an ortho mosaic so that we could input that into our CAD models. We're based in Brooklyn.
I have to stop you. An ortho mosaic. I got to write this down for my word game. I compete with my husband. What's an ortho mosaic?
I would love to show you if I can share my screen, if that's all right, Mayor.
I mean, I've got to see this. If I don't learn something every night, it's not a good meeting. Here we go.
So this is hopefully my hotspot is working okay here. This is 13,000 images stitched together using an FAA certified drone, one of our pilots. And Madam Mayor, you did mention some employees in Westchester. Almost our entire engineering team is actually based in Westchester. And so you can kind of see, if I can zoom in to incredible detail here of just one of those skylights, for example. So really neat stuff. Unfortunately, the roof can accommodate the original proposed system size. It's much smaller. It's around 150 kilowatts, so about 1/5 of the system David was proposing. But we still think it's a great project. It'll afford some solar access to low to moderate income individuals in the village. And really, rooftop projects are great land use. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Man, this was a few years ago, Paul, when we took a little trip over to the Ops Center and we walked up on a roof over there and wondered if the Ops Center could do it. We looked at other buildings. We looked at the new water plant, like, I feel like things are happening. I'm very excited. I appreciate that. Anyway, so I don't know if I should ask the obvious why there are two different companies with us here tonight. I guess they each have their own expertise. I'm not speaking out of turn, I hope. I'm sure thought went into this. So is it that each of you, Brock, that's your first name, right?
That's correct.
Brock? Right. Each of you have an expertise. I assume you know each other if you're in the same industry. So is that what this is about, that you have this expertise? You're a
Exactly.
rooftop
Yep.
expert. Is that your thing?
Yeah, the vast majority of our projects are rooftops, especially for municipalities, affordable housing, and nonprofits. So we tend to focus on underserved entities to really make sure that our renewable energy transition is an equitable one. So we're really excited to bring low to moderate income folks into this community solar system. I'm sure everyone was a little bit shocked at their Con Ed electric bill last month. Hopefully this will help alleviate some of those savings and allow folks to really join in and support solar.
No, I think it's great. Also a reason for those that own houses to go solar. So we were not as hit in my home, but you're right. I think it's great. It's a good time to remind people that the fluctuation in the marketplace is where solar really does pay off, aside from the fact that it's better for the environment. So very much appreciate, folks. Are there specific questions here? Is there comments or questions looking at the gallery to my colleagues?
That,
Oh.
the image you showed us, that was the top of the operations center on 9A.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, it's actually just to be clear, it's the garage behind the
Oh,
operations
the
center,
garage
right?
behind it.
Am I
Okay.
Oh,
correct,
that's
Paul?
correct. Yes, thank
Yeah.
you.
Correct. It's the rear building. Thank you, Brock, for the kudos, but I basically watched while your guys did that drone flyover. I didn't really do much more than that. And Brock's crew is actually coming out next week as well with their structural engineer to confirm what they think from their visual inspection. The roof can hold the weight of the panels. So we're a little further along, I think, with this group. I don't, the scope is also a little different than the train station group, but we're trying to keep everything on parallel track and get both these projects done sooner the better.
Sure. Are there, to your knowledge, Paul, anything going on with the school as far as canopy and rooftops or any other pieces? Or, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm just curious.
I do not know.
You don't know. Okay. All right.
Yep, just to provide just a little bit more context, these properties were actually 3 that we selected to be part of RFP process through New York Power Authority, NYPA. And so these are the results that we were given by the folks at NYPA. They're the ones who have been arranging the interviews with Brock and with David for us, and sort of holding our hand along the way here. So this is also due to the board and Paul's foresight in engaging us in that RFP. So we wouldn't have been having this conversation otherwise.
Right. No, I think it's great. I think in the way I was speaking, it's also just a reminder that it's not like we walked around the village and said, let's do this privately. I mean, it's going through an agency. There is checks and balances in place, etc. It's not like we just, if you want to call me tomorrow and find out why we didn't do another building, there's a reason. This was actually a part of a larger project. That's why I commented to Paul that a few years ago, some of us went on the rooftop and said, wow, why do we think about solar as we go forward? So it's sort of cool. All right. Well, Brock, listen, thank you. Very much appreciate you being at the meeting as well. Very efficient technology that people don't have to come anymore into a building and drive around, but can actually sit in their car and then go on to the next thing. So thank you. We're in the middle of a vote. Martha.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Fire Department removal from active roles, fire, police, and emergency squad. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby removes John Ankle from the active roles of the Ossining Fire Department, fire, police, and emergency squad. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments? Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Fire Department appointment, Washington Hook and Ladder number 2. Resolved that upon the recommendation of Fire Chief Corey Spencer, Ossining, New York was elected an active member, Washington Hook and Ladder Company number 2 for firefighting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments? Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Is there any continuing business of the board? Is there new business of the board?
Yeah, I have something.
Who said that? I didn't see it. Bob?
Bob,
Oh,
yeah.
thank you, Bob.
I had a discussion with the village manager, I don't know, Karen, a couple weeks ago, about purchasing a message board, an LED message board to go out in front of 16 Croton Avenue. So I think it's a perfect place for it. Public relations, getting the message out. If it works well, maybe when we're done with the 5 corners, we do something down there. I think we need to start. The high school is kind of putting us to shame with the nice board they got, and I think we need to step up to the plate. And I'd like to see us pursue, looking into this, putting something on 16 Croton Avenue.
Does that have to be 16, or do you want them to look at the ideal spot, get back to us? Because somebody else said it should be by Market Square where that sort of booth is, or someplace else there, or
Yeah, I mean,
are you married to that is my question.
I'm
or
not
do you
married
just-
to it.
Okay.
I think it's one of the better locations right now. I just kind of hold back on Market Square because of the possibility of changing down there. And I'd rather see us invest it where it's gonna stay, at least for the first one. We still get a lot of traffic on Croton Avenue.
Yep.
It could be, it doesn't have to be, it could be a single-sided sign facing Croton Avenue. A lot of people sit at traffic lights there and pass by there. So I think, to me, am I married to it? No.
But you'd like something like that in the village.
Yes.
Okay, I like it too. So the question is next steps, or whether we need to vote on it. Is that what you're asking, Bob?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, in our discussion, this is kind of in your wheelhouse, right?
So if the board, if the board agrees, we like the idea, so we'll go and start investigating, get some prices, and then bring it back to discuss with the board once we have more detail and information.
We'd love to see
I'm
that.
I'm
I
in
think that's a
favor.
good
I'm in favor of
idea.
that. Yeah, I'm in
So
favor of
am I.
that. Just keep in mind that one thing, while I agree with that. 16 Croton Avenue is still part of the historic district. So, keep in mind that whatever we do, it will complement the history on the building and obviously the district itself.
We will definitely make sure. I don't know how message boards dovetail with historic preservation.
I'm talking about the
I have-
frame,
He's talking about
not
the
the
frame.
floor, it's just the frame itself,
The
The frames come in a
Vatican.
million ways.
I believe we'll be able to get some input on that. So
Great.
Right. Okay, good. So I think there's agreement. I didn't hear from Dana, but I'm seeing her. You
Well,
good
yeah,
with
I
it?
was gonna say, not historically accurate, but
But the frame
I
could
also
look.
think they can be ugly. So, I just hope it's good looking.
Well, we'll get to see it before it goes up, I'm sure, and stuff. Omar, you good? Yeah, I think it's good. I think they come in all shapes and sizes. They come in multicolor LEDs. The technology has changed. They have to be waterproof and blah, blah, blah. But they're done off an iPhone now, which I think is really cool. No longer does everything have to be hard cabled and all that. So it might be exactly the right time. And God knows we do not want to be put to shame by anybody else in the village for anything. So we're good. Thank you, Bob, for doing this. And let's put that, like, let's assign it and get it going. I think it's great. You said one, right, Bob? Because you said the second one, but you were starting with one.
Yeah, I mean, the only
Okay.
other place that would maybe make sense is at the corner of Broadway at the light there, you know, as people come up through 9, you know, I don't know, you know.
Okay.
I'd say we
Well,
start with one and get the feedback and
see how it
warrants
works.
second one somewhere, then we put a second one.
Okay. Good. Thank you very much. Martha.
Sorry, Mayor.
Oh,
I
more
actually
new
do-
business.
yeah,
What?
have one additional item. So a couple of weeks back, we actually had a presentation of the Rec Advisory Board in front of us. And one of the things that I brought up at that meeting was that I wanted to propose to make a park part of, well, no part, the whole process of the Sing Kill walkway. So I would like to see if actually the board is in support of that. And if that's the case, I would like to ask Stuart to start looking into what does that mean? Because it's not going to be an easy task. There's a lot of easements along the walkway itself, and I'm not sure if what
You
would be
mean
the
turn
process.
the Sing Kill into a park, right?
Correct. Yes. So
Is
I wanted
there,
to
is
I wanted
there
to know if
an
the
advantage to that, or like what is the upside of that exactly?
well, right now we are using that as a park. Sure.
Yeah, it was
idea of the
constructed so the
concept-
guys, yeah, so people
So-
can walk and take care of the water, and then it became a
Correct. So
concrete walkway.
correct. And one of the ideas that we had at some point, and I hopefully, if another development comes along, is the connection of that whole pad that we had. And I think the idea of that is, for me at least, it makes sense to call it a park. I'm not sure if there's grant opportunities for something like that. I'm sure there's grant opportunities now, but I think we want to, at least myself, I want to conserve that land. I know nothing's going to happen to it, but I want to have the insurance that we can maintain this property the way we have envisioned.
Okay. That is going to be some work, because actually the whole purpose of that was not for the public, although that's what it became when Paul and company thought for a little bit more work, they can make it into that. It's so that the workers can actually get in by the water and actually clean things in there. That was the original purpose of that. It became bigger
Right.
than that. So it might be, all right, more to come on it. I think it's an interesting idea.
I just want to know if the majority of the board is in favor of making this a park. And if that's the case, I want to have Stuart looking into it. So I'm asking
Yeah.
the board to say yes or no.
Right. So I personally, well, as member of the board, I actually just need to know what the upside and downside of turning something into a park is. If there are downsides, I just want to know. So it's not whether I'm for or against a park. I want to understand what the upside and downside of taking that and making it into a park would be, sort of what I'm interested to hear more about.
Okay, so may I-
I'm good with the idea, to move this forward, to investigate what we need to do, or basically what Rika says.
So one of the things I just want to mention is that one of the DRI projects is actually expanding, creating, as we continue the Kill Brook Walkway through the 30 Water Street project is really expanding its function in terms of educational putting points of interest along it. And, I'm going to let Paul talk just briefly, because we've thought about this. it doesn't necessarily, whether you declare it official parkland or not, it would serve the same function. I think it would bring more interest to the area. But some of the things that we're talking about that we had put into the DRI for this include enhancements to that area, particularly as we extend it. So Paul, maybe you want to mention, because most of these are your ideas.
Thanks, Karen. So what Karen's referencing there, using some of the DRI money to complement some of the monies that Wilder Boulder will receive to develop the public portions of his development, which will eventually be turned back over to us in the form of a park. Part of that park is going to be through access agreements where the park bisects his two parcels, that being the parking structure and the residential structure. And then the rear of the building, which will be dedicated back to us as parkland, is now going to be the western gateway to this walking park that Trustee Casada mentioned creating. Yes, it did start off as an access, but obviously it's a lot more than that now. And we thought that if we could possibly use some of the DRI money and enhance either end of the walking park, and then maybe do some enhancements along the way on the easement, certainly, that would turn it into more of an educational nature walk, and also kind of blow out the gateways to each end, one at the Caputo Center and one on the eastern end of the property that's going to get developed. Because as of right now, the property was only going to get developed when Wilder Boulder builds his units down there as basically stormwater systems on that section and have the park path continuation. But if we put something more elaborate there with possible, which we might be able to do with some DRI money coupled with the other money he's receiving from the county, we can do something a little more grandiose down there at the western entrance, something that is more parallel to what we can do up at the Caputo Center where we have a lot of the space.
So it would be really helpful, as we go through this process, we'll get input from the RAB and I think incorporate those ideas into broadening the concept and developing it as a proposed project. And again, that was one of the things we had put into the DRI application. I think that maybe the best way forward is to work on that, and then we can look at the pros and cons of dedicating, making it dedicated parkland as well. But this sort of keeps up the momentum within our current scope of what we're doing, which is really one of the things is to focus on that area and make it more park-like, I guess, and park-friendly.
So all I'm hearing, though, is that I'm not hearing that they're mutually exclusive ideas. If they are, then we should be looking at whether they are. If they're not,
I don't
then
think
it's a
that
matter
they're
of time.
mutually exclusive. I think that I think they're actually enhance, the
Right.
idea. As far as I need to, and Trustee Casada, perhaps we can talk afterwards, because we do have some areas in the village that are parkland now, but haven't been officially designated parkland, but they are still protected. So we can delve into that just so I get a firmer idea of what the RAB is looking to do. But I think what I'm trying to say is I think that we're all on the same page here in making sure that we're optimizing that space, which I think is the goal. And then making sure that it's preserved as a public recreation area in perpetuity. So
Right.
I
So I
think we're all
think
on the
that's
same
his
page.
point, right? His
Yeah.
point is that if you make something a parkland, it falls under
Right.
different structures legally, and mostly it's protected, which
Right.
is the key to the conversation, if I
Yeah,
understand.
and we can, look into
that I
making sure
agree
that we
with.
have that protection. Yes.
Yeah, so designating and actually making it into perpetuity would be something I would be certainly supportive of as well. So, okay. That should be added to the to-do list, the ever very exciting and very increased in size to-do list, but it's okay. All right, Mr. Fry, it's not, I see a hand up, but this is not, we're done sort of with all the public commentary. I don't know if that's a new hand up or it's an old hand up. We are on to, we're new
visitor
business. Oh, I see. It's visitor recognition. So you raised
Yeah.
your hand up.
Is there anybody here who would like to address the board on issues
we
not
are.
related to the agenda, but are relevant to the common good of the village? Please keep in mind that you have a 3-minute opportunity to speak.
Yep.
And please raise your virtual hand.
Okay, I'm gonna bring Mr. Fry over.
Where is he? Oh.
He's here. I just need for you to turn on your camera. There you go.
Hello, it's me again.
Yeah, you know the agenda better than I do. I'm loving it.
Well, you did a great job.
Welcome
tonight.
again. Thank you.
There's a huge amount of information. Very quickly, I was amazed. My son is the chief economist for New York Power Authority and an Ossining resident. But what Brock Gibeon and Ecogy did up at the Mary Knoll Fathers is phenomenal. Just unbelievable. I'm sure the other vendor is equally good. Many times I'm on the same page, I think, with all of you. Many times I have complimented what Paul Fraioli did. I don't think ever to his face when he was faced with a massive infrastructure project to replace a force main in an incredibly difficult area, that he came up with the idea of actually taking that and taking lemons and turning them into lemonade by putting in that brilliantly well-planned scenic walkway. And I'm happy to see that Bill Bolter will be doing an enormous amount of work on the bottom end of that. I would love to see a stairway going from the south side of Central Avenue, so you can enter it in two places, but I look forward to continuing down that ravine. Dana White has done a phenomenal job at the kiosk over in Henry Gordine Park. And I think that kind of, once you've got that captive audience of people who are stepping back into time, going under the famous double arch bridge. And I think you've got, an opportunity for people to enjoy nature. It's like you're 100 miles away from a city. It's phenomenal. But it also gives you the opportunity to enhance it in a lot of ways, and obviously continue it eventually all the way to the Hudson River. So I think you've got I think Manuel Manicazada came up with a great idea. I think you're all on the same page. That's a phenomenal asset, all the way from the Caputo Community Center all the way down to the Hudson. And you've got the DRI funds available for a certain portion of it already targeted. And I think with the brilliant group in front of me, you can do a phenomenal work. I think Counsel Kahan can tell you about the pros and cons of designated parkland. But I'll leave it at that. Great job. One last thing. I'm looking forward on March 8th to the first public DRI meeting. And as I mentioned, the old-fashioned ways of reaching out to people in certain neighborhoods to ensure you've got a good turnout from the older Black community. It'd be great to get some flyers down in various areas downtown, and also, of course, to do the bilingual flyers, because people like ourselves who are all hooked up with internet, great, but to get the people you don't hear from to the meetings, I'd encourage some outreach via Yuri Chang and her.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Looking forward to that as well. I think that's it. I don't see any more hands up. I think anybody else comments? Okay. I think we're ready to adjourn.
Can I have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
Stuart, we don't have anything. Village
Do
manager,
not,
right?
Mayor.
Terrific. Okay. Martha?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're ready to adjourn. It is 10:18 on the 2nd of March, 2022. Have a good evening. We will see you Wednesday. There is a public meeting on March 8th regarding the DRI, as was just mentioned, and there is a public hearing about cannabis on March 30th. Have a lovely evening. Meeting is adjourned.